Okay, so we're just going to go through the Warscrolls in the Slaves to Darkness faction pack. Before we get too into it, I wanted to mention something I missed in the faction rules section of the video last time. It's just that this Gaunt Summoner has a very open regiment restriction. I talked a lot about how it's a bit awkward trying to find places to put your chaff, depending on exactly how you're building your list. Like if you're taking Be'lakor and like a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, then you have to put all your chaff, the Dark Oath units and the Furies, into Be'lakor's regiment, which means that they're in the General's regiment and they can be targeted with Slay the Entourage. You want to find a way around that, and really the only way around it is to take like a Demon Prince or something like that and then make the Sorcerer Lord your General. So you can put Chosen or Vanguard or something in the Sorcerer Lord's regiment and all your chaff in the Demon Prince's regiment. You do have another option for that. You can pick the Gaunt Summoner, who is probably a little bit more applicable. He's 170 points just for a double casting wizard. He's also got some Warscroll stuff that lets you set up 7 away. You can sort of deep strike a unit, and if you get the spell off in the same turn, you get to deep strike it 7 away instead of 9 away. I guess I'll talk a bit about that when we get to his Warscroll, but I did want to highlight you do have another option other than the Demon Prince, but that awkwardness still exists, that you can't take Dark Oath in any of the Chaos Lords, the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, or anything that's like one of these Warriors of Chaos locked factions. I just think that's kind of awkward. And I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into it is the marking. The way I'm going to mark Warscrolls is just determining whether they're good, mediocre, or bad. Good Warscrolls are things that have like a bit of technology on them. They do something really unique. They unlock something in the army and allow you to do something that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do. They're just sort of fun and impactful. Mediocre Warscrolls are things that are generally just stat blocks. They don't have anything sort of special about them, but if the points are right, they might be good enough. So you get 1 point for them, 3 for the good ones. And then if it's a bad Warscroll, or if it's a really ugly old garbage model, I'm going to give it -1 point because I just don't think they should have bad Warscrolls. Or it's a bit harsh on the ugly models, but I really hate them, and I'm the one doing the marking. Also, we're going to give penalties for duplicate Warscrolls. So, for example, in the Stormcast Eternals book, there's a lot of these. You'll have 3 different versions of Dracothian Guard that they're almost identical, like the Concussors, Fulminators, and I think they might be called Decimators. I actually don't even know what the other one's called. They're all duplicates. They just take up a bunch of space, and they're sort of bloat, and we want to penalize bloat. So it's okay if you've got maybe 2 things that are both good, but once you start getting additional Warscrolls, or if you've got a bunch of bad ones or a bunch of mediocre ones, then those negative points will rack up really quickly and ruin the Battletomes unit score. So having a concise list of good options is what you want, rather than a big sprawling list with a few good options in it. Okay, I think that's all we need to cover before we get into the Warscrolls. And we're going to start with the big man himself, Archaon. I do want to point out, I haven't played with Archaon. I've played against him. So I'm not going to have a good gauge on whether he is like worth the points, but thankfully I don't really need to know if he's worth the points. He's got an interesting Warscroll, and just what he does is kind of unique. So there is some points cost where I think Archaon is fun and interesting. So he's pretty much guaranteed to be a good Warscroll. Anyway, I think the big thing to notice about him is that he's got 25 health, 3-up save, and a 5-up ward. He's also a wizard too, which is kind of nice. He's got a decent amount of attacks. I don't think he's the most heavy damage unit in the game. Like I think if you take 6 Vanguard, they're going to do more damage than Archaon. You don't really take him for the damage. You take him because he's very survivable. The fact that he has 10 control is pretty relevant as well. Just because of that survivability, if he gets on a point, there's a very high chance that he'll be able to score it. When he gets battle damaged, he loses a couple of the worse attacks on his scroll. And this is quite nice because he gets battle damaged at 10, and a lot of heroes have battle damage that comes in when they only have like 4 wounds left or something. Like there'll be a 14 health hero, and they have battle damage after 10 wounds. For Archaon, obviously, he still has 15 wounds left when this starts kicking in, so it's good that it doesn't cripple his Warscroll. He's still pretty competitive, especially since he's not a particularly high damage hero in the first place, he still sticks around and is quite useful even if you drop the 10 wounds off him. He's got the Eye of Shirian, so once per battle in your hero phase, you roll a die, and on a 1 or a 3, your opponent has to take the first battle round next turn, and on a 4 or 6, you have to take the first battle round, and if you've both got an Archeon, they cancel out. I think this is the unique, interesting thing that makes you take Archeon over taking like 6 Vanguard. Or maybe it's just because you like the model, I don't know. But this is the thing he does that nothing else in the game does, and nothing else in the book does. So you can use it only in your hero phase, but you don't want to use it if you're going first in the battle round. The key advantage of this ability is that you get information about the following turn. So if you're going first in the battle round and you use this ability, then you'll know whether or not your opponent's going to have a double turn or not. But your opponent also gets that information. They also know. And I think the idea here is you want to use it when you go second in the battle round. Your opponent has to go first. They don't know what's going on. They have to play around the double turn or play around you not having the double turn. So they have to sort of hedge their decisions. Whereas you use this ability, then from your hero phase onwards, from the start of your hero phase, you know whether or not you're going to get the double turn in the, you know whether you're going to have 2 turns in a row or just 1 turn. And knowing that means you can make very aggressive decisions. Like if you know you're going to have the double turn, there are strategies that you can use, moves that you can make that would be too risky to make if you didn't have that foreknowledge. So this is a very interesting, very compelling ability. It is a little bit random because if you just roll the 1 to 3 and your opponent takes the turn, that's still useful information to have, but it's, I'd say, not nearly as impactful or nearly as useful as knowing that you're going to have 2 turns in a row. One little thing about it is I assume the interpretation of this is if you're forced to take the double turn, then you're not really choosing it. And because you're not choosing it, you don't have to give up the battle tactic when you take that double turn. If that's not how they rule this ability, then my interpretation is going to be a bit different. There's like you might use it when you go first in the battle round as a way of trying to force your opponent to drop the battle tactic, but I don't think that's how it'll work. I think mostly you just use this in the second round, and there's a high likelihood that you're going second in the battle round because if you're taking Archeon, he is a single drop that is like 700 or 800 points or something. I actually probably should check. 900 points, sorry. Which means you're not going to have that many more units in your army necessarily, or it's very easy for you to be a low drop army, especially since he has that open regiment restriction as well. He can take pretty much anyone he likes in his regiment. Okay, so the rest of the stuff is a lot less interesting. He's got Slayer of Kings, so each time he uses a fight ability, if the unmodified wound roll for 2 or more attacks made with Slayer of Kings that target a hero is a 6, the hero is automatically destroyed. He only has 4 attacks on Slayer of Kings, so the chance that you get 2 6s on the wound roll is actually pretty low. A lot of the units that really, really care about this are going to be things like Gargants, and they have a rule that stops them being slain instantly. This can end up doing a whole bunch of extra damage to them, and things like a Maw Crusher or a Vlozard, which are like 400 point plus fighty guys, I guess they're a little worried about this, but the chance is pretty low. You can't rely on it as the Archeon player in any case. You get an extra mark, but most of them are useless. The Khorne mark only gives you 1 attack on Slayer of Kings. The Tzeentch mark gives you a 4-up ward against damage from spells, and it would help that you're picking this in the deployment phase. So if you're playing against like Tzeentch or Seraphon, and they have a lot of mortal wounds in their spell laws, I don't actually know, I haven't read their books yet. But if they do, then this would be quite useful, except that you already have a built-in 5-up ward, so I don't know how much you want the +1 to your ward against specifically just the spells. I think you just sit on your 5-up and then use Nurgle. Nurgle is -1 to be wounded in melee. Obviously, that's a big deal when you have 25 health, 3-up save, and a 5-up ward. Nurgle is a huge buff to Archeon, whereas Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh are not. Slaanesh is +1 to run and charge. You probably don't want to run Archeon because he doesn't have run and charge, and he's 900 points of your army. Plus one to charge is kind of nice. By the same token, like you don't want 900 points of your army to fail a charge. So I guess that's potentially useful, but I think stacked up against Nurgle, you're probably not going to take it very often. And he gets Undivided by default. And Undivided, I think, just gives you +1 to wound against heroes and monsters, which will only work on Slayer of Kings. So just pay attention to that, I suppose. When he's fighting a hero or a monster, he'll have 2s and 2s on that sword all the time. Then he's got a Rampage, and he gets to pick one of these effects. The first one is you roll a dice for each model in a unit within 6, up to a maximum of 7 dice, and then for each 3 up, you inflict a mortal damage on the unit. This is a really weird ability. It's like, looks like a horde killer because you're rolling dice equal to the number of models in the unit, but it caps out at a really low number at 7. So basically it does like 5 mortal wounds if they have 7 or more models, or maybe it's 4 mortal wounds. It's not bad. It's just a weird sort of target profile, right? If they have 30 models and they're like some big, I don't know, reinforced unit of zombies, they have 40 models in it. This is only going to do a few mortal wounds and the zombies aren't going to care. If it's something that only has like 3 models in the unit, like a unit of Vanguard, then they're still not going to care. I think the ideal target is actually like reinforced Vanguard type stuff that has 6 or 10 models that are really high value in terms of their armor save, and then you'll deal like 4 mortal wounds and actually kill something. So it's a really weird, really niche kind of target for this ability. Speaking of which, Skullgorger, you pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit and roll a die. If the roll exceeds the target's health characteristic, 1 model in the unit is slain, and you can heal X this unit, where X is the unit's health characteristic. This is very awkward because it's not reliable on anything with more than 2 wounds. Even if you've got like a 3 wound, let's say you're fighting some Chosen or something like that, a 3 wound unit is still a 4-up. So this is not necessarily that useful. It's going to deal 3 mortal wounds in that case against a 3 wound unit. And you could just use Filth Spewer and get 3 mortal wounds so long as they have, what is it, like 5 guys in the unit. Filth Spewer will do the same damage. This will be a little bit more reliable than Skullgorger. I suppose this heals you, but it's only going to heal you 2 or 3. So, I don't know. These are weirdly situational abilities that don't help you that much. I think you might just use Filth Spewer most of the time, and then if they only have a couple models in the unit, you just pick Skullgorger just because Filth Spewer won't do much. The third one is actually quite useful. You've got Spell Eater, pick a manifestation, roll within 12 and roll a die. On a 2+, it is banished and inflict D3 mortal damage on the unit that summoned it. I love the little D3 slap in the face. I have a feeling, you'll have to look this one up yourself, but I have a feeling that this gets round the Kronspine, Purple Sun, and Ravenex Gnashing Jaws. I have a feeling that those Warscrolls say if they're banished, or if you use the banish ability on them or something specifically, like they reference the banish ability, not just the word banished. So I have a feeling that this will get rid of Kronspine in one go, or Purple Sun or whatever. And because of that, this is actually a very useful rampage to have. It does mean, because you're using it in the combat phase, it does mean that you're still blocked from movement and stuff by the manifestation during the movement phase, which can be a little bit awkward, but certainly this is a neat option to have when you need it. Overall, I think this is really weirdly designed. These are all so situational that there's actually a lot of situations where none of them are useful at all. Like if you're fighting a big monster, but I suppose when you're fighting a big monster, then this is useful. So all of these abilities together, you probably have something that is doing something. But that's all kind of dull. It's really just this ability that I think is quite interesting. And if you don't like this ability, I wouldn't bother playing Archaon. I mean, if you're a Timmy person who just loves massive monsters, it's hard to go past him in those terms. He's just got a huge wound pool and he's really, really, really durable. But yeah, just weirdly boring on a lot of these rules over here. I think I mentioned that he was a wizard too, and then he has a ward 5 up. Definitely mentioned that. yeah, I don't know there's much else to say about Archaon. All right, so we got Archaon's a good special character. He's got the eye for a 50-50 double turn. Useful info. And then he has a bunch of weird abilities. So I think Archaon's good. I think he's interesting just because he is big enough and hits hard enough and has this unique ability. But if you compare him to like 6 Varangard or something like that, or I guess it's 9 Varangard for the points, really it's this ability is the reason you want to take him if you're, I don't know, if you're thinking competitively, maybe. Then again, I haven't played with Archaon, so I could be wrong about that. Wouldn't take my advice competitively. But for me, this guy's not very interesting. I'm not very interested in like the big god models and stuff like that. But there's certainly a place for him somewhere. Okay, we've got the Demon Prince. He's 10 health, threat save, move 8, and control 5. I think it's interesting that he's control 5 because he is not a monster. He's infantry. Infantry matters for getting guarded hero. So if he's within combat range of another unit, then he gets the full guarded hero thing. It's not just -1 to hit, but also can't shoot him unless you're within 12, which is kind of neat. He's got a 6-up ward by default. I really hoped that he'd become a wizard. He's definitely missing something in the Warscroll. Anyway, he's got 6 attacks, 3s and 3s, 1 rend, 3 damage with crit mortal. This is actually a fairly beefy melee profile. It's not the best, especially depending on the points cost. He's 280 points at the moment. It's just probably not worth it. But this is a decent amount of damage. It's not nothing. This is one of the big problems with the Demon Prince in the previous edition. He was, I think, maybe 5 attacks, 3s, 2 rend, 2 damage, and then maybe he got errated to go up to 6 attacks or something like that. This is getting there. This is a decent damage profile. I think what lets him down is the access to artifacts and heroic traits, and just those things are not very good. So you get to pick one of these 2 options. You're either an airborne horror and you've got a move characteristic of 10 and fly, or you take the trophy rack and you get anti-hero +1 rend. I think you pretty much always take the wings. If you don't take the wings, it's going to be very difficult to get into combat with enemy heroes. Having 8-inch move without fly will just make it difficult to use this. So you're better off having this and being able to access those enemy heroes than you are taking this and having the little bit of extra rend against them. You get to pick a Mark of Chaos, and most of them are kind of useful on the Demon Prince. Corn, you only get 1 attack because you only have 1 profile, but it is a 3 damage attack. Like, it's a pretty high value attack. Nurgle is pretty good. He's got a lot of wounds and armor and all that sort of stuff, so the additional durability is useful. +1 to charge is quite nice, especially since he might be a counter-charging unit. You could keep him behind a screen. He sits there buffing them up with Ruinous Favor and then charges over the unit when they get charged. So I think Slanesh actually might be okay on the Demon Prince. And then Undivided is not too bad. You get that +1 to hit, especially since you have the wings. You'll be able to get in combat with an enemy hero. Sorry, not +1 to hit. It's +1 to wound. But you'll very reliably kill heroes with this profile with +1 to wound. So I actually think any of these except Zinch are somewhat useful. Excuse me. Okay. The only unique sort of thing the Demon Prince does is this. Ruinous Favor only happens in your hero phase. You pick a friendly non-unique unit wholly within 12 of this unit that shares a Mark of Chaos keyword with this unit to be the target. I did mention it in the previous thing that I thought maybe you'd be able to buff up your unique characters like Be'lakor or something like that, but I had to check. Well, this is me checking. You can't do the unique characters. I knew there was some kind of restriction on it. They have to share the Mark of Chaos keyword. They have to be non-unique. Then you roll a dice on a 3-up. the target can immediately use the Eye of the Gods ability as if at the end of the turn, and they had destroyed an enemy unit this turn. So I don't love that it's restricted to matching Marks of Chaos. I don't think they really ever need to do that. It just sort of limits your targets for no reason. But interestingly, there's no restriction on him just using it on himself. So even if you do this as like a power pair, you take a specific unit that you want to buff up and they both have the same mark, and then they have different marks for everyone else, and that unit dies, the Demon Prince can still target himself. So there's something to do with it. And he's actually not a horrible target because the 3 options are like +1 to hit. He hits on 3, so that's good. It's an additional rend. He's sort of missing a bit of rend here, so that's quite good on him too. And you get the improved ward because he starts with a 6-up ward. Going to a 5-up is actually quite good. So he's not a horrible target just for using this ability. I think the problem is those abilities are themselves not things that break rules. They're not something that gives you a piece of technology that lets you get around restrictions in the game. It's just more stats. And so when you're in a situation where you're just looking at more stats, you can kind of compare this unit to a different unit that has more stats. So a Demon Prince, I think, is like 280 points, and Varangard are 310. And Varangard, they have 5 extra wounds. They move 10. I think this guy, he'll move 10 when you give him the wings as well. Varangard are just base rend 2. I think they're only damage 2, but they go up to damage 3 on the charge. And obviously you have 9 attacks on a unit of 3 Varangard, plus the mount attacks. It's sort of like, if you think about over the course of a game, you're going to roll this 5 times, and you'll succeed 3 or 4 times. And then just assume, let's say you get it 4 times, but one of the times that you get it, you roll that 1 in 9 chance. So either you'll get this 3 times or you'll get it 4 times, and one of your Eye of the Gods rolls will just fail because you roll the 1 or a 2 twice. So you get roughly like 3 buffs out of this over the course of the game, and you don't know when you're going to get them. So that last buff is coming in at like turn 4 or 5, and the buffs are like +1 to hit, the 6-up ward, or maybe a 5-up, and +1 rend. But if you compare this guy to a unit of Varangard who are similar points, well, the Varangard come preloaded with +1 rend. And if you went from a 6-up to a 5-up ward on this guy, then you would have like, it's as though you had 15 health roughly, which Varangard come preloaded with 15 health. And if you got +1 to hit, I suppose Varangard don't have +1 to hit, but they do more damage. They have more attacks. So they kind of come preloaded with +1 to hit, or at least they come preloaded with additional hits. And on top of that, Varangard do a better job of soaking up all of these buffs. They do more damage, so Undivided is better. They've got more profiles, so Khorne is better. You're never putting Tzeentch on anything. They've got more health, so Nurgle is better, and Slaanesh is about the same on both. So when you look at the Demon Prince, you're thinking, why am I taking this hero? Why don't I just take more Varangard? I think that's the problem with the Demon Prince. He needed something that justifies him as a hero slot, as opposed to like just more beat stick. And if he was a hero, if he was a wizard, I should say, I feel like that would fill that slot. He's not horrible. There is like a certain points cost he could be where I kind of like this guy. This is a bit of fun. If they improved that Eye of the Gods table so it had no dud options, or if this was just automatic, or if you got to roll in both hero phases or something like that. Once again, I think they think this ability is super powerful because you just get so many permanent buffs, right? But getting a permanent buff on turn 5 is the same as getting a buff that lasts until the start of your next turn, right? It's actually not that important in a 5-turn game that you have unlimited scaling, right? That you can keep stacking these things up, because you only get to keep them until the end of the game. So these sorts of abilities are often much worse than they look. And because this ability is just giving you stats, he's just like, okay, I guess. So I don't know. I don't know whether to make the Demon Prince like a good unit or a mediocre unit. I think he just squeaks into good, like just squeaks in. So Demon Prince. Certainly if he was low enough points. Actually, here's the thing. Here's the difference between a Demon Prince and a unit of Vanguard. This guy can take heroic traits and artifacts. The problem with the Demon Prince is that our heroic traits and artifacts are horrible. If we had, for example, the the crown. Sorry, that's one more thing I should mention. Obviously, Vanguard are much better than the Demon Prince because they have an ability that lets them fight twice, once per game. I'm assuming that when you take the Demon Prince, you're giving him Deathmonger, and he would have a fights twice, once per game as well. So it's a very close comparison. But the artifact is a dead option. Maybe if we had a good artifact for a combat hero, then this guy would be a bit better. Like if you had the Helmet of Many Eyes, I think. There's been a staple in Slaves to Darkness for as long as I can remember. Way back in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, they had the Helm of Many Eyes. And I think it would be something like Always Strikes First. That would make this guy pretty good. That would really help him in this role of maybe being a countercharger so that he can fly over your units and get into combat that way. He would fight first, so he's not screwing up your activation order. He does something a bit different to Vanguard. Like, it gives him a place if he could have an artifact or some other options in the heroic traits other than just the fights twice thing. Or if he came preloaded with fights twice and then could take an artifact or something on top of that. I think that would push him over the edge. That's made up my mind. I'm going to put him in mediocre because of that. He's like, just stats, really. Access to enhancements is not enough. Bad enhancements. I think that's the main thing. If he had good enhancements, he would be good, but the book doesn't have good enhancements, so there's no real reason to take him over anything else. It'd just be neat. If he was like a wizard or something, great. Or if they had an enhancement that made him a wizard. But yeah, as it stands, I think he's kind of meh, which is sad. I really like the Demon Prince model. And he's certainly much improved over the previous one, who is just totally useless. All right. Vanguard. Okay. Vanguard look like a pretty boring war scroll, but being able to fight twice is actually amazing. They move 10, 5 health, 3 up saves, so they're quite durable. They do an absolute ton of damage. 3 attacks, 3 threes, ran 2 base with 2 damage base. They've got crit model all the time, and then charge +1 damage as well. And you can give them an extra attack, or you can give them -1 to be wounded. These guys are mostly just a stat block, but the existence of this fight twice thing is just stellar. They just perform really well. They're really fun to use, and I think they fill a role on the table. There is a bit of a problem with Vanguard, with Slaves to Darkness in general, that they have a lot of units that do the same thing. Vanguard and Chosen and Knights all kind of fill the same role. They're all slightly different versions of the same thing. Maybe separate enough, like Chosen are infantry. They're obviously much slower, but they still fight twice and just do an absolute ton of damage and take a bunch of damage. I do think there's a bit of an issue in Slaves to Darkness with how much overlap they have. Anyway, I think Vanguard are excellent. There's not a lot to say about them, but just solid. When you play with them, you certainly notice that this is a bit of a build-around thing. They just have the stats, and the buffing them up feels really good because of this fighting twice thing as well. If you can get additional bonuses on them, they get to carry those bonuses through 2 fight activations. That's really handy. They've got some synergy as well with, like, they strikes last, but you've got some effects that can make your opponent strike last, like Binding Damnation, and there's a bit of synergy with Abraxia as well. So I just think these guys are fantastic. Then we've got Be'lakor. Be'lakor is a 14 health, 14 move, 4 up save guy. He's got Ethereal. Actually, that's one of these things. So he ignores modifiers to his save roll, both positive and negative. He's a wizard too and has a 6 up ward. So he's fairly durable. And then he's got a really decent combat profile. It's not super fighty. He's not like an out-and-out combat hero, but he's no slouch in combat either. This is a fairly scary profile for a lot of units to come up against. And I think Be'lakor just crosses that threshold where he's sort of both a good utility and casting hero as well as being a good combat hero. Whereas a lot of these sorts of units end up in this middle ground where they don't quite do anything well. I think Be'lakor does everything kind of well. A bit weird that he has crit auto wound. He already wounds quite well up here, and especially because he's undivided when he's fighting heroes, he'll get those wounds really easily, but I suppose it might be a bit too good if you had crit mortals. And then he gets charged +1 damage on the tail, which actually might happen because it's 2s, 2 rend, and 2 damage. Yeah, quite a good profile. When he's battle damaged, he loses 2 of his attacks, which is, I guess, a shame, but you're not losing the good attacks, and he's down to 4 wounds if he's battle damaged. So it's pretty unlikely that he's going to be fighting much in this situation anyway. I mentioned he's got the ignore modifiers thing, and he's got a really powerful rampage. So once per turn, army, enemy combat phase, so specifically the enemy combat phase, you pick this unit and up to 2 friendly Slaves to Darkness units within this unit's combat range to be targets. Be'lakor has a really big base, so it's actually very easy to fit 2 units within 3 inches of it. Then you roll a dice for each target. On a 4-up, the target has strike first for the rest of the turn. I talked about this in my Stormcast video. It is much more valuable to have this sort of effect when your opponent has to make the decision to charge you. Your opponent has to play around the probability, or play around the possibility, I should say. They have to play around the possibility that you will get strike first. Whereas if it was on the other side, if you were rolling this to see if you strike first when you're charging the enemy unit, then you have to play around the possibility that you don't have strike first. It makes it really weak. So in this case, if you've got Be'lakor standing there with a unit of Chosen or a unit of Barangard, it can be very, very difficult and very threatening to get into combat with any of those things, because there is a potential that they activate first and they do a ton of damage to you before you have a chance to activate. Be'lakor himself, you can deploy him sort of behind your units. He doesn't have to be in combat to use the ability. So even if he's screened off, he can still give the units that are in front of him this fight's first. And you can use things like countercharge to position Be'lakor so that he's in combat with something that might not have been within 3 of him at the start of the turn. So there's just lots to worry about from your opponent's perspective from this ability. I think it is actually a bit cooked. Very, very powerful. Picks himself as well as 2 other units. Like, there's just lots and lots and lots here that is really powerful. Once per battle enemy hero phase, he's got the Dark Master. So you pick a visible enemy unit to be the target. It's worth noting that Obscuring only cares about shooting attacks, so you can't hide from the Dark Master by sitting behind something that's obscuring. You would have to hide literally your entire model behind a piece of terrain to avoid this. But I do think it's different. I don't think you had to be visible last in the previous version of this ability. But you do have to be visible now, so there's potentially some units could avoid it. Until the start of your next turn, each time the target is picked to use an ability, roll a dice as a reaction. On a 3-up, that ability has no effect. This is obscenely powerful. You get to see your opponent pick their battle tactic, and sometimes that battle tactic involves a specific unit doing something. So a lot of the time, this just shuts down a battle tactic all by itself. It is very hard for your opponent to plan around this. I understand some people are a bit sad that it works in the hero phase because it means that you can't stop your opponent casting spells, and I'm pretty sure the ability did used to stop people from casting spells, but it's picked up a whole bunch of extra uses because it affects every ability. So the first time I played with Be'lakor, I noticed that a lot of the abilities in the game are used by units, and some of those are like the command re-rolling your charge. I'm pretty sure that ability is used by a unit, and because it's used by the unit, you get to roll a Dark Master roll against it. So the game that I played, my opponent had to get this unit in combat. He was doing a destruction battle tactic. I failed this reaction roll, so he was allowed to do the charge, but he rolled too low and had to use the command point to re-roll the charge. And then I was successful in using this to stop him re-rolling the charge. So he still had to spend the command point, and it didn't make the charge and lost the battle tactic. That's a huge blowout. It's a very, very powerful ability. I don't particularly like using it. It's a bit of a shame because I really do like the Be'lakor unit, but this control-y playstyle I find is a bit frustrating. But this is just obscenely powerful. It is totally game warping, and it's a piece of technology that really no one else has anywhere in the book or in the game. It's a very unique, sort of very powerful ability. And then you've got Enfeeble Foe, which is a spell with a casting value of 6. It's got a range of 18, which is quite good because your whole spell lore is range 12. And the effect is, until the start of your turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls for the target's combat attacks, and the target's combat attacks cannot score critical hits, treat them as regular hits instead. This is so powerful. So many units in the game hit on 4s. So many units have crit mortals. This is an absolutely bonkers ability to have available to you. It lasts until the start of your next turn, so you can enfeeble one foe, and then you can use magical intervention to enfeeble another foe with a 6 to cast. It's not impossible to cast on your opponent's turn as well. So, same with that range. Like everything on this War Scroll is super useful and super impactful, super interesting, and just like the stats back it up as well. This guy, to me, is one of the best War Scrolls in the book, and probably one of the better War Scrolls in the game, not just in terms of power level, but also in terms of design. These are all interesting, impactful abilities. I don't necessarily love all of them. Like, I think Dark Master and Deadly Trap are very awkward for your opponent to play around, and they might not have enough counterplay. But certainly they are doing something interesting and fulfilling a role in the Slaves to Darkness army, at least. So depending on the points cost, well, almost not depending on the points cost, right? Be'lakor could be really expensive, and these things are still doing very unique, powerful things. Almost doesn't really matter what points he costs. He's not depending on his stat line to do anything. He's just going to be good. So top marks. I think Be'lakor, very good. Good everything. So what is it? It's 2 casts. He's got himself and 2 units next to him to strike first on a 4+ in enemy turn. Stops a unit doing anything on a 3+ for a whole turn. I'm pretty sure this ability still works until the start of your next turn. So if you go first in the battle round and you use the Dark Master, obviously in their hero phase, and then they double turn you, it lasts through the double turn as well, which is just absurd. Maybe 2. Excellent spell. Just 10 out of 10. I really, really like Be'lakor. I think he's just a fantastic unit, and he's a fantastic model as well. It's very, very hard to avoid the temptation of just taking Be'lakor in every Slaves to Darkness list, unless you're like me and don't really have the money to buy the model at the moment. All right, you've got Eternus. Eternus has 9 move, 9 health, a 3-up save with 2 control. And I think the best comparison for Eternus is going to be the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. It's very similar. He's got a sort of decent combat profile. Again, looks very similar to that Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. I think maybe he gets an extra attack or something. Although it looks like Dracocephalus has 1 fewer attack. I'm not sure. Any movement phase, he can use this ability even if he's been destroyed. Roll 2d6 and add 1 if a friendly Be'lakor is on the battlefield. On an 8+, set up a replacement unit on the battlefield more than 9 from all enemy units. I have a feeling the core rules stop you from setting up a replacement for a replacement. So he can only come back once, which is not very eternal of Eternus. I would have thought he could just keep doing this because, again, it's only a 5-turn game. So the fact that you got him into combat and he died, and then you brought him back in a subsequent movement phase, how many times can that happen that this would be overpowered? I mean, I suppose it is any movement phase. It could be quite a lot. There is a very high chance that he comes back, given that you're rolling on your turn and your opponent's turn. You don't necessarily need Be'lakor on the battlefield. I'm pretty sure he's... you can take him in Be'lakor's regiment specifically, so he doesn't have to have his own regiment. Then he's also got this reaction. Opponent declared a command for a unit within 12 of this unit. Roll a dice on a 1. Add 1 to the roll if the enemy unit is in combat with a friendly Chaos Legionnaires or Chaos Furies unit. On a 5-up, that command has no effect. The command still counts as having been used, and the command points spent. So you have to be locked into taking Legionnaires. I think there's meant to be sort of a build out of this. You take Be'lakor and Eternus and a bunch of Legionnaires and Furies. And my understanding is that both of these are okay units. Like Legionnaires are a decent chaff and Furies are quite good. But this ability is fairly specific. You have to be within 12 of them and they have to be in combat. Oh no, it's just add 1 if they're in combat with these things. So this is not a bad ability. It's very frustrating. I've played against Olinda, the Nighthaunt ghost thing. They're all ghost things. Olinda and I think Kurdos might do the same thing. They have like anti-command ability rolls. This is very, very frustrating. It can hit things like countercharge as well. Yeah, it happens in any phase by the looks of it. So it could hit any command ability. That's actually not a horrible ability to have. Depending on points, I feel like this guy actually is good, but he would have to be fairly cheap. Like he's not doing a ton of damage, and he's taking up that hero slot unless you're taking him in Be'lakor's regiment. Yeah, this thing is a neat sort of ability. He does get set up more than 9 away. I don't know. I think he's good. I think there's a points cost where you take him. I don't think you take him as a drop, though. I don't think he's worth a drop. So it's like, specifically in this regiment, if you take Be'lakor and if Eternus is cheap enough, then I think he's all right. How much is he? 230. So he's actually cheaper than the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. All right. I think he's okay. I don't know. I'll put him in the good. I think it's possible he is ancillary junk old. I'm going to put him down here, but as good. Stops commands on a 5+. Chance of... sorry. Comes back on an 8+. On 2d6 each movement phase. So there's like a narrow spot for him, but in that spot I think he's okay. And he's probably not worth 230 points, but there is a potential points cost where he's fine. And forced undivided. Okay. Thanks, Ali. We got a Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount. He's got movement 10, 8 health, 3-up save. His combat profile is a lot better than it used to be. This guy's biggest problem before is that he had he's really pillow-fisted and didn't really do anything. It's very hard to justify his points. And he has a buff as well now. He's got the weird... He has to fight with another unit and it only works with cavalry. So I'm pretty sure Warriors of Chaos cavalry is Knights or Varangard. And then the unit gets +1 to wound rolls. Yeah, thank you. That's very nice. +1 to wound rolls is okay, but this guy has to be really cheap because he doesn't have any drops options that let him not take up a regiment. I think these things are the kind of ability that looks okay on paper, but when you use them, you realize it's really easy for your opponents to avoid getting in combat with the hero, or that like you have to spend 2 command points to countercharge the hero in to force it to work, or just like just imagine you have a unit of knights or vanguard, and then you want to put this guy in the front middle. When you're making a charge roll, you have to successfully charge with both of them. You can't move the unit around when you're piling in, so the guy has to kind of be on the side of the unit instead of in the front of it, and because they're on the side, they can just charge the portion of the unit where this guy isn't. So these abilities are very, very awkward to use consistently. So this guy would have to be really cheap and probably not take up a regiment slot. I just think it's badly designed for what it does. Not totally useless, but I'm gonna chuck him in a mediocre as a hero. So First Lord on Demonic Mount. Mostly just awkward. I don't know. I'm tempted to just make this guy bad. Just because of, even if you take him, he just doesn't work properly. You have to do the double charges. Like you have to make both of your charges. Your opponent can avoid him. He's just awkward. I don't know. I really don't like this ability. I don't like any of these. I'm gonna put in bad. There's almost no point where I take anything with this ability, and we're gonna see there's a lot of them in this book. Then we've got the Gaunt Summoner on disc. He's movement 14 with 6 health and a 4-up save. I think importantly, he's a double caster. He has a 6-up ward. He's got like some shooting attacks and I guess some melee attacks. They're not super important. He can, you can put units in reserve, and then you can use this ability to set them up. They're going to be wholly within 12 of the Gaunt Summoner and 9 away from enemy units, but obviously you can move the Gaunt Summoner first. So he could potentially run 20 inches and then you can deploy another 12 inches away from him. So 32 inches away from your deployment zone, you can position units pretty effectively with this guy. There is a bit of a risk if you put something in the Silver Tower and this guy gets killed. You can't use this ability to set them up, so they're just stuck in the Silver Tower, and eventually they'll count as being destroyed because they'll still be in reserve later in the game. But you don't have to declare any of this stuff in list building. You just do it in deployment. So if you're facing an opponent's army where they can kill your Gaunt Summoner, then you just don't put expensive units in the Silver Tower. I think also the way this reads, you can have multiple Gaunt Summoners and there's sort of some redundancy. If you deploy things in the Silver Tower with either of their abilities, you can use either of their Book of Profane Secrets to deploy them. This is also not restricted to like once per turn army. So if you have multiple Gaunt Summoners, you can summon out multiple units at the same time. So the Gaunt Summoner is pretty versatile in terms of this, and actually might be worth a pick. I think there's a build somewhere with the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak with some Slanesh Mark, so you can get +3 to charge, and you can set up 9 away from enemy units and then charge out of Deep Strike. You just have to sort of make sure your opponent isn't able to kill these Gaunt Summoners. Then he's also got Arcane Imprisonment, which is a casting value 7 spell. You pick an enemy hero in combat with this unit to be the target and make a casting roll. If the unmodified casting roll exceeds the target's health characteristic, it is automatically destroyed. For the rest of the battle, that unit cannot be picked to be the target of an ability that allows a replacement unit to be set up. This is kind of fun. You just like trap them in the void. Very unlikely that you survive a round of combat with your 6 health and your 4-up save with like a 6-up ward. If this guy spends a turn in combat, he's probably going to die. But then you can use Arcane Imprisonment. If he happens to be in combat with a hero, you're probably not going to roll above the health characteristic of anything meaningful. But if it's one of these foot heroes, this is quite fun. It's quite flavorful. But in competitive terms or power level terms, this is basically blank text. This does pretty much nothing. The reason you take this guy is because he's a double caster. So he can cast Manifestations or your lore spells. And you can set units up in reserve, and then he can move 14 and then spit those units out. Did I say? Yeah, 32. Yeah. Okay. So actually, I really like the Gaunt Summoner. I like both of them. because they do something fairly unique. So Gaunt Summoner on disc. He's like a double caster, moves fast, sets up within 12. No feels bad. I'm taking multiples. I think it would have been unfortunate if they had like your movement phase army or something like this, so that you couldn't drop multiple units out of them. But it's kind of fun. You can take more than one Gaunt Summoner if you really want to. If you just want a whole bunch of casts, it's a bit sad for Slaves to Darkness players that lost we lost Kabbalists. So having a bunch of casts in your list is kind of hard to do. But with Gaunt Summoners, you could take like Be'lakor and a Gaunt Summoner or 2 Gaunt Summoners or something, and you can rack up those casts really quickly. Especially the foot guy is not very expensive. I think this guy's 250. That's a fair bit, but the foot guy is 170. So you can get a lot of casts in these lists with these guys. So the Gaunt Summoner on foot, he has a 5-inch move with 5 health and 6 up save. So he dies if you breathe on him. He's got that 6 up ward and is a double caster as well. I think that makes a big difference. If he was a single caster, this guy would be a lot worse, but being able to cast twice is really nice. He has some shooting attacks as well and some pretty bad combat attacks. He does exactly the same thing, deploys units in the Silver Tower and then sets them up 12 away from, within 9, within 12 of him and more than 9 away from enemy units. I got there eventually. But he has a spell that has casting value of 7, and when you set up a unit with his Book of Profane Secrets, you can set it up within 18 instead of within 12, and you can set them up 7 away from enemy units instead of 9 away. This is, I think, a better version of this guy. The Gaunt Summoner on disc moves further, I suppose, but to me, I think the real value is in this guy. He's cheaper, so you get those 2 casts for a lower cost. If you cast this spell, I would prefer to have the 5-inch move that you can run up to 11 with it, with the 18-inch range. Then I'd would this 14-inch move with the 12-inch range. So all up, it's like 32 maximum, putting a unit away from your starting location with the guy on disc. Whereas, what's this guy? 11 plus 18 is 29. So there's not a lot of difference between them if you really want to slingshot a unit across the board. The big advantage is that you get this, being able to put a unit 7 inches away is huge, especially if that unit has the Slanesh mark. So it's effectively 6 inches away. A 6-inch charge with a reroll is very reliable. So just putting Slanesh units in the Silver Tower and then summoning them out, you have like a Slanesh unit of Chosen that just like appear and charge into the enemy unit. You could combine this with the Karkadrak Lord. You've got like a guaranteed charge then if you got +3 to your charge, or you don't want them to have the Slanesh mark, you could use the Karkadrak Lord to give them +2 to their charge and they could keep whatever mark they wanted. In general, this spell is something that you will use, whereas the Gaunt Summoner on disc spell is a waste of space. So, my money's on the dude on foot. I think actually it's quite a neat list to be able to build something where you take like Be'lakor and then a Gaunt Summoner as well, just because it gives you lots of options about how to arrange your list, and he's got 2 casts. You end up with 4 casts in that list, which is quite powerful as well. You do have to worry about the same thing about him getting shot, but in particular, this guy's infantry. So he's got guarded hero. It's much harder to shoot, whereas this dude, the dude on disc, is cavalry. So he doesn't get that guarded hero stopping people from shooting him, and he'll be worth shooting if he's the only way to get units out of the Silver Tower. So once again, I think the Gaunt Summoner on foot is a much better option. Actually might put... Yeah, I'll consider them as a duplicate. So we got Gaunt Summoner on foot. Spell lets you set up 7 away. Needs the Slanesh mark. the difference between a 7-inch and a 6-inch charge on reliability is huge. And I think single-handedly, this Gaunt Summoner on foot makes the Slanesh mark an actually useful mark. And it sort of redeems it because it makes it like a bit of technology rather than just a buff to the unit's operation. It's like this thing can charge out of Deep Strike, and having that written on a War Scroll is actually really impressive, even when you line it up next to -1 to be wounded or +1 attack on the charge. I'm going to put the -2 in the Gaunt Summoner on disc. I do think these things fill the same role, but they're both good. So they do get an additional point. They'll be 3 points each, and then they lose a point. I'll lose 2 points on one of them. So I like both of these units. I'm probably going to pick up this model at some point. It does have to be Tzeentch. I should mention that. You don't get to pick a mark on it. I don't think that really matters for anything, but you just have to have the worst mark on your wizard for no reason. All right. Ogroid Therodons. So you got a 6-inch move, 5 health, and a 4-up save. So these guys got hit by the weapon unification, and they're forced to take sort of a middle weapon. They're a bit more durable now. Before you had an option between like great axes, which I'm pretty sure were damage 3, and the sword. It's like a falchion, a big sword, and a shield, which gave you +1 to your save. Now they take the defensive option, but they do have 4 attacks each. They hit a bit worse than they used to, but I think they wound better than they used to. They lost a Pip of Rend, which is a big deal for this type of unit. They do get anti-infantry Rend, so I guess they get that back against infantry. This happened with a lot of units, like Blood Knights lost their Rend, but then got anti-infantry. So, I don't know. And then you've got Unleash Savagery. Once per battle, any combat phase, add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. So they do a fair bit of damage. That's their thing. Oh, and they get a mark. They come in 3s. And I think the problem for me for these guys is because they're forced to take the savey option. I'm describing this wrong. They're not really forced to take any option, but the way the book has designed them has increased their durability and made their damage a bit more niche. They're less of a glass cannon than they used to be. And I feel like that was their role before. And now they fill the same role that like Varangard and Knights and all the other powerful damage dealing units in the book do. Like, it's hard to justify taking Therodons over just taking more Varangard. And you get this problem like throughout the book where you're like, why do I want this thing instead of just taking, like, I guess actually Chosen are a better comparison for Therodons because of the slower movement. Why am I taking Therodons over taking Chosen? Chosen hit really hard as well. They've got a once per battle ability that lets them fight twice. So that's similar to this, once per battle +1 damage. They have like more durability and stuff. I just don't really get why I'm taking Ogroids now. Whereas before they were like a cheap way to have a damage dealing unit. And if you played well, you could like have a unit of warriors and a unit of Therodons. You would have 2 units instead of 1, and you would still have the same durability and damage output, but you just had to play a bit better around it. So Therodons, I'm like, meh. They're okay, I suppose. They're not a hero, they're a non-hero. So Ogroid Therodons. Good damage. No identity. They really did need to be pushed further into a role, I think, for them to be interesting. Worth noting, they're about 200 points, I think. Ogroid Therodons, yeah, 200 points. So they fit in sort of the same slot as, I guess, Chaos Warriors or something. But I think the real comparison for them is the Chaos Chosen. The Chaos Sorcerer Lord on Manticore. So he's got okay movement, only 12 wounds instead of 14, and only the 4-up save. He's got like some attacks, not fantastic, but not nothing either. He does this Oracular Visions thing, which the other Sorcerer Lord does as well. So once per turn, army. So there's no point taking more than 1, or little point. It's just a bit of redundancy. Your hero phase. Pick a friendly Warriors of Chaos unit wholly within 12 of this unit to be the target and roll a dice. On a 3+, that target has a 5-up ward until the start of your next turn. This is quite good. It's probably the reason that you would take a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, but you don't get much by taking the one on Manticore over just taking the one on foot. So you also get this rampage, once per turn army any combat phase. Pick an enemy monster within combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice. On a 3+, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. This is okay. Like, strike last is good, but it only targets monsters, and your opponent just might not have any. This ability is very good, but like I say, it's on the Chaos Sorcerer Lord as well. He's only a Wizard 1, and he's a god-awful old ancient miniature that only has a 4-up save. I just don't think you take this guy. There's a point where he's cheap enough that you're like, yeah, I do want a chance at making a monster strike last, and he's a wizard, I suppose. But to me, this is a kind of dull war scroll. It's like weirdly situational. I don't know. I don't like it at all. In any case, it's a hero that goes in the bad bin because it's ugly and old. Yes, Lord, Sork Lord. Manticore. Ugly, old. Thankful. No, I don't have to use it. Take the foot one. Then we've got the Chaos Lord on Manticore. It's similar sort of wheel, same problem. This guy wants to be in combat, but he has a 4+ save, so he doesn't really survive combat that well. He doesn't have a ward or anything. He's got some okay attacks. Like, this is not a terrible profile, especially when you look at his points. Like, Chaos Lord on Manticore is 260 compared to the Karkadrak, 250. So, like, point for point, just fighting wise, this guy isn't too bad. He's got some control score ability, adds 2 to control scores of friendly warriors of chaos units while they're wholly within 12. It's so boring, and I'm not sure it's impactful either. I suppose he's warriors of chaos. Yep. So he at least has like control 7. So that's something. Then he has Apex Predator. Pick an enemy monster in combat with this unit to be the target. Add 1 to hit rolls for this unit's combat attacks that target that monster for the rest of the turn. It also affects the companion weapons. I don't know. Like, this is not a stellar combat profile. I think most of the monsters that this guy is going to fight outmatch him and just kill him. So you don't really want to take him for the one thing that he does. I think this guy's even worse than the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore. Like, I can understand taking this in a list because you want oracular visions. This will be situationally useful. This is just bad. Just garbage. I don't think they take up the same space, though, even though they're both on a Manticore. Maybe the Chaos Sork Lord on Manticore takes up the same space as the Sorcerer Lord, actually. So we'll do -2 for that. Chaos Lord on Manticore. Ugly, old. Doesn't even do its job well. Same sort of thing here, actually. If you take the Sorcerer Lord on Manticore and you want it to be in combat to make the thing fight last, that unit is not going to survive the combat that it's in. And it doesn't deal enough damage so that it matters whether the Sork Lord on Manticore goes first or not. So you'd have to use the Sork Lord on Manticore to make them fight last, and then some other unit to do the damage. And then you can, like, half the time, if it's your turn, you can just activate that other unit first anyway. If your opponent's doing it, they can just avoid charging into the Manticore, and then you have to use counter charge and all that sort of stuff. It's just not that useful. All right. Oh, and this guy's definitely -2. Like, I know they're trying to carve out a niche for monster fighting, but to me, he's like in the same spot as the Demon Prince and maybe even the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak, where he's like a decently fighty lord, and I don't know, because he doesn't do his job well, he sits in that same space. It's just terrible. They should have squatted these things. I was really expecting with the Abraxia release that we would get a generic option of Abraxia that would be a Chaos Lord on Thanatog or something, but we didn't get that, which is a bit of a shame. We've got the Chaos Lord on foot. He has like an okay melee profile with 6 wounds and 3-up save. He's got the same thing. He does add 1 to wound rolls, which is probably the better version of all of these sorts of buffs. But you have that same awkwardness of like, if I'm trying to use this guy with some Chosen, he has to like walk up next to them, but he has to stand on the edge of the unit because he can't stand in front of them. That's too awkward. He can't really stand behind them because then he won't be in combat. He has to stand to the edge, and then it's easy for your opponent. It's just, These things are horribly designed, and I do not like them. So he's going to go in the bad section as well. Oh, did I put I put some of these in the wrong spot. We'll put the Vanguard in non-heroes. I feel like I missed. Oh no, he's here. All right, Case Lord on foot. Awkward. Takes a drop. I think all of these guys, all of these like foot heroes that do this should have been Ruinous Champion type units, because it's very, very difficult to justify taking an entire extra drop for this, which probably won't work. Even if the points were totally free, even if this guy was actually free, there will still be a lot of situations where you're like, I don't know if that's worth it. Worth pointing out, I guess he only works with infantry as well. So the cavalry guy only works with cavalry. The infantry guy only works with infantry. That's unnecessary. These abilities are already really bad. Whatever. Then we've got the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. He's got a 9-inch move. This makes me so sad because Chaos Knights and Vanguard, I think, both move 10. This guy could have just moved 10. It would have been fine. I know this guy doesn't look as fast as those things. They're all riding horses, and this lizard thing is clearly more stocky. But just for convenience, it's nice when all of your cavalry move the same distance. Anyway, he's got 10 health and a 3-up save. The 10 health is quite nice. He used to have 9 wounds. He used to fit really nicely into the 9 wound versus 10 wound category. Now that doesn't matter anymore, and he gets the extra wound, so good for him. He's got actually a really good combat profile. It's like 5 attacks, 3 threes, 1 2. This is almost the Demon Prince profile. He's just missing 1 point of damage, which he gets on the charge. He's got that crit mortal as well. So this Hex Weapons profile is as good as a Demon Prince on the charge. The Demon Prince gets 1 more attack, but this guy gets like a bunch of Karkadrak attacks as well. So decently fighty, does an okay amount of damage. Not nothing. Sort of, I think, gets over the bar of being like worth it to take the fights twice heroic trait on. This guy and the Demon Prince both. He's got any charge phase. If this unit charged this phase, pick up to 3 enemy units within one of it to be the targets. Roll a d3 for each target on a 2+. Inflict an amount of mortal damage to the target equal to the roll. I think it's pretty funny that he has a limit of 3 targets. Like, you can Tokyo drift this guy into 3 different enemy units and deal impact hits to all of them, but they thought maybe being able to hit 4 units at once, that's just too much value. I don't know what situation you're finding yourself in where you're able to do that. Maybe someone's doing the old Nighthaunt strategy of having like 5 heroes standing next to each other. But anyway, this is kind of fun that you can hit 2 or 3 units. There'll be some situations where this happens. It happens in any charge phase, which is nice for all these charge abilities. And then it's got once per battle army, any charge phase. You pick this unit and up to 2 friendly non-hero warriors of chaos units wholly within 12 of this unit to be the target. Add 2 to charge rolls for the targets for the rest of the turn. What's really nice about this is that it is any charge phase. It's once per battle army, so you can't like take 2 of these guys and buff the same unit, or that'd be the same ability anyway. You don't really want to. He's kind of expensive at 250 points. One of these is enough. It hits himself and the other 2 units. That's quite good. But being able to use it in the opponent's phase is a neat bit of technology. You can't use your command points to re-roll a counter charge because you're using a command on the unit to do the counter charge, and you can't use more than 1 command per phase. So bonuses in the enemy's turn are also quite useful. We can use the spell to charge on 3d6, or you can use this. Even though you're wasting it on the additional units, you can use this to make one of your units charge. This also isn't restricted to cavalry. I was a bit surprised when I read this, like looking at the Chaos Lord and Demonic Mount and the other Chaos Lord, like everything seems to be cavalry is restricted to other cavalry and infantry with other infantry. This guy, I guess, blurs the line because he's not quite on a horse. That's why he only has 9 movement, remember? So yeah, you can use this on Chosen and things like that. And obviously you can combine it with things like the Gaunt Summoner. So you can summon something 9 away or maybe 7 away if you get the spell off, and then you get +2 to charge. That's very reliable. I think this bonus is actually unique, and it's a bit of technology that is really good in the army. If it was +3 to charge, it would be absolutely stellar. +2 is just not enough, but obviously you can make the unit Slanesh and then you get +3 as well. That is really, really reliable. At that point, you're getting really big bonuses to your charge distance, and you can really surprise people with long distance counter charges as well. So I think this guy definitely has a place. It is a bit unfortunate that it's still Warriors of Chaos, but most of the units that you want to use this on are in that group, so that's not too restrictive. Overall, I quite like this guy. It does depend on how many points he costs. I think because he's a drop as well, this sort of has to justify it, and he's not doing that much else outside of it, so it's a little bit awkward. I'm not sure this is enough for a hero, but I quite like him. I think he's a good war scroll. He's sort of on the line of whether or not you really want to take him in the list, and if he's low enough points, I think you do take him. So Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. +2 to charge once per game on any Warriors Chaos, even up charge phase, and also Tokyo Drift charge mortals. It's pretty fun. They can hit like 3 things with the charge mortals. I don't know if he's like competitive, but he's fun. So then we got the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. He's got like not many wounds. He's got a 4-up save and sort of bad wizard attacks. The only thing on his war scroll is the Oracular Visions. So once per turn army, your hero phase, you pick a unit of Warriors of Chaos, and on a 3-up, they have a 5-up ward. This is really, really strong. This guy is only 120 points. He's a wizard. And his infantry, so he's pretty easy to hide. I think there are lots and lots of lists that will want this guy. Putting a 5-up ward on your Warriors, Knights, or Baron Guard, or Chosen, they're all excellent targets. You pay a lot of points for those 3-up armor saves. It feels really bad when you get blasted away by mortal wounds and things like that. With the ward and with Nurgle as well, they get very, very durable. There's no like restriction on having to have the same mark or any of that dumb stuff. It is a bit sad that it's on a 3-up because that often just doesn't happen. So it's not fully reliable. But I guess it could have been a spell or something, and that would also be unreliable. So I like this. I think this guy's pretty good. He'll have a place in a ton of armies just because he's cheap. He's a wizard, and this ability is stellar. So we're getting the Chaos Soulclord. Soulclord. 5+ wardies. Cheap wizard. For me, this guy is the main guy that is a bit unfortunate about the regiment options. The fact that he can only take like Warriors of Chaos. If you look at him, he's the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. He can only take Warriors of Chaos plus a Ruinous Champion or Monster. Because a lot of the time you'll want some unit to be your general and then like one of these guys as the other option. It's just very sad that you can't put Chaff in this guy's, like he can't take Furies or anything. But oh well, I think he's still a very good option and you'll be happy to have one. You probably don't need 2. Having 2 means like you only get to use this once per turn army. The redundancy I don't think is worth the extra drop in particular. All right, we've got the Exalted Hero of Chaos. This guy is one of the Ruinous Champions, so you can take him in a whole bunch of different regiments. Pretty much like all of these Warriors of Chaos regiments allow you to take one of these Ruinous Champions. And this guy is one of them. He's not good. So he's got 6 health, 3-up save, 5 move, Blaze of the Dark Champion. He's got like 5 attacks, 3 threes, 1 2, but he has a whole bunch of buffs. He's got anti-hero +1 rend, anti-monster +1 rend, and then +1 damage when he's targeting heroes or monsters. The Marks of Chaos are a bit awkward on him because he only has the 1 profile, so he only gets +1 attack from Khorne. I guess, you want him in combat. You want him The charge might help. He doesn't have a ton of saves. Like, he doesn't benefit that much from any of the marks, really. Altogether, I think you probably want him on Undivided just because he wants to fight heroes and monsters. All right. And you'll get the +1 to wound here. You can use like an all-out attack. So you'll be on 2s and 2s. Rend, if you're fighting a hero monster, rend 3, damage 3. That's actually a little bit scary for how few points the guy is. But in pretty much every situation, when he's not fighting one of those hero monsters, he is not doing much damage. Even if he's just fighting a monster, but nobody takes monsters that aren't heroes. So in the specific situation, he's okay. But you just won't be in that situation a lot of the time, especially because he moves 5. So I don't know. You could stick him around your army and just sort of like hope that the enemy comes a bit too close and like you get a chance to activate him, but he's not going to do more damage than the really heavy hitters. So if your opponent's coming in with something that you really need to kill, you're just going to activate with your Baron Guard and really kill it. Yeah, he's just awkward and not very good. He's a cool model though, and I'm glad that you can take him as a Ruinous Champion so he doesn't take up a drop. If you have a spare, what is he? Exalted Hero of Chaos. If you have a spare 130 points left in your list, Slaves to Darkness can be very difficult to find another thing that doesn't take up a drop, right? You know, the Chariots are pretty bad. I guess you probably just want another unit of chaff, like you want Furies or Marauders or something like that. But hey, this guy's kind of fun. He's not great, but he's kind of fun. So I'm going to put him in mediocre. I don't mind this guy, but he's not very powerful. Chaos. I am sad that he lost his once per start of the game roll on the Eye of the Gods table. I just always thought that was a fun little thing you could do with this guy. There was you could give him Favored of the Pantheon as well, so he would roll twice, and you're just sort of like building up this guy. But you're investing in a very, very small war scroll that doesn't have a lot of stuff. So like, okay, in the tiny niche that he's in, but probs a no. I think you could run him without feeling horrible about it, but he's subpar. Next, we've got the Ogroid Myrmidon. This guy is also a Ruinous Champion, so he fits in that same doesn't take up a drop slot. He's got 6-inch move, 8 health, 4-up save. So his save is a bit worse than some of the other heroes, but he does have the extra health to make up for it. Doesn't have a ward, or he's not a wizard or anything. He's got he can throw his spear and it'll probably miss, but when it hits, it might do some damage. And then he's got actually a really scary combat profile. This is doesn't have the crit mortals, but is very similar to the Demon Prince's combat attacks. He's got 6 attacks, 3s, 2s, 1, 3 damage each. Like that's actually something. That's a decent amount of damage. And if he's damaged, then you add 2 to the attacks characteristic, so it goes up to 8 attacks. Unfortunately, there isn't a good way to like pre-damage the guy. It would be neat if you could make him a wizard or something, and then you could try and cast Spite Tongue Curse and hurt yourself so that you would be better in combat or something like that. But you have to like survive a round of combat, and with 8 health or 4-up save, there's a good chance you don't survive a round of combat. And he's got one of those weird fight abilities for Ogroid Therodon specifically, and when they fight after him, he gets +1 to hit rolls. I don't think you take this guy. If he's cheap enough, possibly, if you really like the Ogroid Therodons. It's just occurring to me that these guys probably can't take each other. Yeah, they can't. What about Ogroid Myrmidon? Yeah, you can take Therodons, but you can't take a Myrmidon as a Ruinous Champion in a Myrmidon's regiment, which I thought would be kind of neat. You could have like Be'lakor, and then you could have 2 Myrmidons with 2 units of Therodons or something in the same regiment and just save on your drops. But can't do that. If he's cheap enough, the combat profile could get him there. This ability sucks. I hate this. This is like once in a blue moon, this will happen. So mostly he's just like a hero that fights a bit. It's kind of meh. I don't know if it's bad. I feel like he's okay. Fight's okay. That's about it though. he's a cool model, but I'm going to give him the -2 points. I feel like he fits into like a similar thing. I know both of them are Ruinous Champions, but he fits into a very similar thing as the Exalted Hero of Chaos. He's just sort of like okay at fighting. The other thing that I guess he's similar to would be the Demon Prince. So I think on both counts, he's sort of just the same guy once again. And you could just take more Therodons. So he has to be better than another unit of Therodons. He's 190, and a unit of Therodons is 200. So you probably just take another unit of Therodons, or you just reinforce your Therodons, because Therodons have 4 attacks each and whatever. I don't know. Okay, I had to step away for a second. I think we're at the Chaos War Shrine. So this thing is a bit weird. So it's a hero now. I don't think it used to be a hero. And it's a priest, even though we don't have a prayer law. It just prays this one thing. It's got an 8-inch move, 14 health and a 4-up save, and sort of garbage attacks. It's got battle damaged, even though it does almost no damage to begin with. Then you've got a 6-up ward on Warriors of Chaos units within 12 of the War Shrine. This is actually better than it looks because all these guys have a 3-up armor save, and a lot of them are going to be Nurgle, so they'll have -1 to wound as well. Stacking defensive buffs together is really effective because essentially every time you make one of these ward rolls, your opponent has to get past that -1 to wound and that 3-up save again to take away that wound. So using wards on high durability units is really efficient. The same way you want to buff your the damage output of your high output units. It's the same sort of logic. There's also a little added bonus of if you roll on the Eye of the Gods and you get the ward effect, it just checks if you have a 6-up ward already. And if you do, then you get the 5-up ward. And it doesn't matter if you then walk away from the War Shrine or whatever. You'll keep that 5-up ward. So I wouldn't take the War Shrine just for that effect. But this is actually a fairly neat upside for this army. The big reason that you take the War Shrine is this prayer. So you pick a visible, friendly Slaves to Darkness unit wholly within 12 that shares a Mark of Chaos keyword with this unit to be the target, and then make a chanting roll of d6. So you can pick itself, which is important for generating ritual points. And then you apply the effect of the relevant mark. So you probably don't take this in a whole bunch of these marks. So Undivided, this effect is really weak. You just make 3 additional rally rolls. It's kind of like healing D3, but you have to spend the command point to rally. This is a very weak effect. Adding 1 to the hit rolls for the target's attacks is fine in Khorne. You probably don't bother taking a whole War Shrine to do this, especially because this thing doesn't do much damage. You'd just be better off taking some other unit that does damage, or spending the command point or something like that. I can't imagine you take it for the Khorne buff. The Tzeentch bonus here is really weak because you have to take the Tzeentch mark to do it. And you've got other ways to get a 5-up ward. So 5-up ward is good, but I don't think you're going to want to take the War Shrine and the other thing. You may as well just take the Sorcerer Lord on foot because this is not reliable anyway. A 4-up to chant this versus the 3-up on the Sorcerer Lord. You're better off just using the Sorcerer Lord. I suppose there are some non-Warriors of Chaos units that you might want to give a 5-up ward to, but I'm struggling to think of which units they would be. So yeah, I can't imagine you get much use out of this. The Nurgle one though is quite good, and the Slaanesh one is excellent. So Nurgle is add 1 to wound rolls for the target's attacks. Nurgle is an excellent mark throughout the book. Just -1 to be wounded in melee is universally very applicable. It's a very strong mark. Taking a War Shrine, adding 1 to your wound rolls means you don't have to faff about with a Chaos Lord on foot. You can make your Chosen or your Varangard, or like every unit in the book is basically on 3s and 3s. Adding 1 to wound is really nice. You can combine this with all-out attack in the way that you can't with the Khorne mark. So you can make your units very durable and hit very hard as well. So I think the Nurgle bonus here is actually quite good for the War Shrine. And then you've got, for Slaanesh, you add 1 to the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for the target to a maximum of 3. This is absolutely stellar. You don't have to rely on the demonic speed. Having both means it's very reliable that you will get at least one of these effects, and you can have two of them in the same army in the same turn. You can do one with demonic speed and one with favor of chaos. I have a feeling this ability is part of the reason the Slanesh mark is bad. It's deliberately worse than, say, like the Khorne or the Nurgle marks, because this is such a strong buff. And actually, if that's their intention, I really hate that design, because I really hate the Chaos War Shrine as a model. This is one of the derpiest, oldest looking, like two random ogre kind of dudes carrying a weird boat looking thing. It's so horrible. But these are actually pretty good effects. If the chaining roll is 8+, you get to pick 2 eligible units instead of 1. This is probably a bit more useful on the Nurgle mark than it is on the Slanesh one. But you can use this in the off turn. It's a very reliable thing to use in the off turn. So you could generate points in your turn and then use Magical Intervention with those points to get the 3d6 charge in the opponent's turn. So you can countercharge with one of those Slanesh units. I think the only thing about these abilities that's not fantastic is that it's just rest of the turn. So you do have to be using it in your turn and then using it in the enemy turn to get the most out of it. Altogether, this is like an okay unit. It does do something that's kind of awkward to access elsewhere in the book. Like, these are okay buffs. And this is, in particular, this is a piece of technology that is just really, really useful to use in specific situations. And sometimes you'll jump through hoops and, take this weird ass thing, even though it's a drop, and spend the time praying and all that sort of stuff just to get 3d6 charge. Like, it's not useless. It's just that the model is really horrible and it itself doesn't do anything, and it takes up a drop, and then you're stuck, putting the mark on this and on the other thing. I just don't like the design of this unit. I don't like that it's sort of half of the battle traits for the marks are put into the War Shrine as a unit. I just think this is sort of awkward and frustrating. So for me, I think this is bad, partially because it's ugly and partially because a lot of these abilities are useless because of the way they've done the marks. And it's just not a very fun sort of model. You're really jumping through a lot of hoops to get 3d6 to charge, or maybe add 1 to wound rolls on Nurgle. All right. It's a hero, and it's in the... I'm going to put it in the bad section. I think I'd normally put it in mediocre. But it's such an old, ugly model. And I actually kind of dislike that they've given an old, ugly model rules that are usable. Ugly as super racist. Like, it really, really cares which mark you have. I never really understand that in the whole... Like, the book is meant to be like chaos soup. So why don't you just let me do whatever? They could make the ability... like, this guy just automatically has undivided. The War Shrine is always undivided. And then the ability is dependent on the unit that it's using on. So you can give Slanesh units 3d6 charge and Nurgle units 1 to roll, but it's not restricted to having exactly the same mark as the mark the War Shrine has. I just don't understand that design choice. I don't know. Fairly unique. Bonus. No, it's not unique. It's like alternate. Alternate access to 3d6 charge and +1 wound on Slanesh, respectively. Yeah, so you can get these effects elsewhere, but these are probably, I guess, an alternate way to get those effects: the add 1 to a wound on Nurgle and the rolling 3 dice on the charge for Slanesh. And I like that it's an alternate because I don't want to take that unit at all. All right, the Soul Grinder. This is another unit that I just forget that this War Scroll exists. It's probably because it's a 40k model and really doesn't belong in Age of Sigmar at all. Anyway, it's got 10 movement, 16 health on a 4-up save, and it has a ward of 6 up, so it's fairly durable and not the slowest thing in the world. It could be slower given what it looks like. It has 2 guns, and one of them is spitting on things. They're both 12-inch range. They do a little bit of damage, but not a ton. You're probably not spending the command point to use covering fire with this, especially since you're hitting on 4s. It's just not that much range damage. And the melee weapons are like, okay, I guess. You do get to give it a Mark of Chaos. It's battle damaged at 10 wounds, and its piston-driven legs and demonic blade or claw drop down to 6 attacks. I guess that's fine. It's got a passive. This unit can use charge abilities even if it used a run ability in the same turn, which I guess helps because it's not the fastest thing in the world, but with run and charge, sort of getting there. And then once per turn army, any combat phase, you've got the piston-driven carnage. Pick an enemy infantry unit in combat with this unit to be the target, roll a d3 on a 2+, inflict an amount of mortal damage to the target equal to the roll. Then this unit can move 6. During that move, it can pass through models in the target unit, but must end the move in combat. Interestingly, with this, it doesn't have to end the move in combat with the thing that it started in combat. So you can charge into some infantry, do some mortals, and then like walk over to something else. But you do have to end in combat with something. So you can sort of sneak this thing into a surprising spot. You can run it, then charge it, then move it 6 away from the thing that you charged into something else. So I suppose there's a bit of gameplay to it, but mostly it's just a bunch of stats and a really awkward sort of unit. It misses a lot of buffs, so it's not Warriors of Chaos. You can put it in a lot of those regiments if you really want to, because of the way the battle profiles work out. A lot of them have this like 0 to 1 monster in them, even if they're a Warriors of Chaos thing. But they miss out on some of those good buffs like the 5-up ward. It doesn't really do enough of anything. It's the same awkward spot. Literally every one of its weapons is a companion weapon. There's like not a good way to make this thing work. I just hate it. I don't think it should be in the army at all. All right. It's a bad non-hero. Soul Grinder. 40k unit in AOS. Very boring to boot. So I think mostly, it doesn't even have a 3-up save. I think maybe you make it Slanesh. You make a Slanesh Soul Grinder because it's got run and charge, so it gets +1 to run and +1 to charge, and then it's got a massive base though. So even all this like sneaky, surprising movement and being able to get an extra 6 inches here and then pile in and whatever. Like, what's the effect of all of this? You can get this profile somewhere. This profile is not that much damage, especially since you can't buff it with anything but all-out attack. Like, I don't see the point. All right. We've got the Chaos Chariot. So 10-inch move, 7 health, 4-up save. So this thing's not very durable at all. It does have 2 control. And then you pick either the Warflail or the Great Blade, and they work out to be very similar damage, which is not much in any case. It's got some extra attacks, which are all kind of garbage. So pretty much this thing does no damage in combat. It's got any charge phase. It'll do D3 mortals. That's about it. It's pretty dull. I suppose it could help you do battle tactics, but it's not that fast. I think it used to move faster, and it used to have a built-in run and charge, which kind of gave this thing a role, but this is bad and does nothing. Actually, where did I put that Soul Grinder? Yeah, in bad. I think same thing. I'm not super sad about it this being bad because I think the model is ugly and I don't really like chariots in the first place. But they did have a purpose and a use in the previous book, and they don't here. They also absorbed the Slanesh buff really well because they had run and charge and they had impact hits based on the charge roll. So adding +1 to both of those things was really helpful. And now almost none of these things mattered. Like Undivided and Khorne don't matter because the attacks are so bad that there's no point buffing them. Nurgle doesn't matter because its defensive profile is so weak it's not worth buffing. Slanesh, I guess, helps it get somewhere, but it doesn't matter if it gets anywhere because it doesn't do anything when it gets there. It only has control 2. Like, what is the point? Why would you even take this? If you have 110 points in your list, take Furies or Dark Oath or something. I don't know. Gore-Beast Chariot, I have a feeling this will be the same thing, and it's like a duplicate, so move slightly slower, it's got an extra health, and instead of doing impact hits, when it uses power through, it does an additional D3 mortal damage. So it's a bit like the Stormcast Chariot. Both of these together are like the Stormcast Chariot. Right? The Stormcast one does impact hits, and then when you power through, you do an extra D3 and get some distance. These have split them out into 2 different units, and neither of which is good enough to take. So, like, Gore-Beast Chariot. Who is spending the CP to power through with a dead chariot? This thing probably won't survive combat and won't have an opportunity to power through. And even if you do, I don't think it's worth the command point. Yeah, you do an extra D3 mortals, but you're moving this thing. Who cares? This is horrible. Worse than that, it's a duplicate Warscroll. It like does the same thing the chariot does. So I know. Not that the chariot does anything, but this is a duplicate of that. Just horrible. All right, we've got the Dark Oath Chieftain. So far, what I'm seeing with Dark Oath stuff is they're kind of too much into... You need to invest too much into them. You can't just like take a couple Dark Oath in your army. You have to take like a leader and a bunch of other stuff. It's very annoying. So anyway, this guy's got 5 health and 5 up save with no ward. He's, very, very likely to die. 5 attacks, 4 3s, 1 2 crit mortal. So that's not a great profile for a hero. It's like hitting on 4s. Not terrible though. He's got the weird fights and then pulls in something else and gives it +1 attack, which is, I guess, +1 attack's a good buff in the scheme of things, but I just hate this ability and don't think it'll work. And you've got a once per battle, end of any turn. If he kills a hero or monster, then he has strike first for the rest of the battle, which doesn't matter because he doesn't do that much damage. So this guy, pretty well useless. What is he? He's a bad hero. So check him in here. Dark Oath. Which one's he? The Dark Oath Chieftain. Weak. What should I call these abilities where the hero fights and then the unit fights? Like the double activation, +1 attack thing. Strikes first on a weak profile. If you manage to kill a hero or monster, like you have to get this profile, this weak profile, to kill a hero or a monster, and then your reward is that you get strike first on this weak profile. Who cares? Like the whole thing is just, who cares? Terrible. And you have to take Undivided on all of the Dark Oath guys. All right. The Dark Oath War Queen, she's a similar sort of 5 health, 5 up save. Was he 5 up as well? Yep. She's got a rune etched axe, which has a similar sort of profile. Once per turn, army your hero foes. You pick an objective this unit is contesting, then roll a dice. On a 3+ for the rest of the turn, other friendly Dark Oath units have a ward 5 up while they're contesting that objective. She automatically has a ward 5 up. I guess that's kind of neat. She doesn't die instantly. Still not a durable hero though. So you pick an objective that she is on, and then you roll a dice, and on a 3 up, other Dark Oath get a ward while they're contesting the objective. But only in your hero phase and only for the rest of the turn. So if it's your opponent's turn, you just don't have this ability at all. So you can't like put her and a unit of Dark Oath on the objective and then give them a 5-up ward to protect them when the opponent comes to take the objective off you. But if it's your turn, the way you use this is you're already on the objective. Her and the unit, like she's already on the objective, and the unit that you're buffing has to get on the objective. And I assume there are enemies on there because that's how you're going to use the 5-up ward, because it only lasts to the end of the turn. So you have to be taking damage the turn that you use it. Like, what is the point? Just the timing of this just doesn't function. You're never going to be in this situation where she's on a point and there's some other unit that can... It's garbage. I'm just ignoring that. Once per battle, any charge phase, Oath of Supremacy. If this unit is wholly within enemy territory and charge this phase, for the rest of the battle, add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks made by friendly Dark Oath units while they're wholly within 12 of this unit. So wholly in enemy territory and charged for the rest of the battle, you add 1 to hit rolls for combat attacks. Okay, I mean, that's all right. So she can... That just turns into an aura. That's kind of okay. It's doable. It's a bit unfortunate that it's not just like wholly outside friendly territory. It's wholly within enemy territory. And a lot of battle plans, that's going to be very low, like a very small area. But then she just gets the +1 to hit rolls buff. I just don't see room for her. She's cheap. I really don't like this. If she just had an add 1 to hit rolls for Dark Oath units while they're wholly within 12 of her, that'd be fine. You wouldn't need this other thing. This is fine. I hate that you like have to play this little mini game to get ordinary buffs. These are not strong units in the first place. Why do you have to like play the mini game? And like if it was just add 1 to hit rolls for Dark Oath units don't do any damage. It's not risky to give them a good buff. If anything, I feel like when you fulfill the condition, you could like add 1 to hit rolls, and then if you do the Oath of Supremacy, you add 1 to wound rolls as well, and it still wouldn't be overpowered because Dark Oath don't do much damage. They're not a super scary unit to begin with. They're mostly just chaff. You have to give them really, really powerful buffs for it to matter. Dark Oath, War Queen, which is the same. I really like all these models. I like the Chieftain and I like the War Queen. I think these guys look really cool. I'm a big fan of the classic barbarian look. I just don't get it. Useless ward thing. +1 to hit very occasionally. And otherwise she doesn't do anything, right? I feel like it's the same thing. She does the same thing as the other guy as well. Like both of them have a very, 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 very situational buff to your Dark Oath guys. And their role is like, they have a battle profile that lets you take other Dark Oath. This is just garbage. This is terrible. All right, Chaos Chosen. Hey, back to good things. These guys have a 5-inch move, 3 health, 3 up save, 1 control each. They've got 3 attacks, 3s, rend 1, 2 damage, crit mortal. This profile is absolutely amazing. Then they're once per battle, any combat phase, they can fight twice. After the first is used, they have to strike last for the rest of the turn, just like normal, and they soak up a lot of these buffs really, really well, right? Undivided just increases their damage against heroes and monsters. Khorne gives them extra damage on the charge. You've got like 5 or 10 of these guys in your unit, so +1 attack is a fairly big increase. Zinch, again, is a useless mark. Nurgle is really good because you want to fight twice, so you want to survive the swing back and fight again. And Slanesh is pretty useful because these guys are fairly slow, and there's a lot of shenanigans with trying to teleport these guys using the bridge or something like that, and Slanesh makes these really reliable. Also, the way I see Chosen used a lot of the time is they just kind of sit just behind the front line, and they're a counter attacking unit. So in the opponent's turn, they'll charge in and fight some things, and then you get to, in your turn, your Chosen will be well positioned to like jump in and deal a bunch of damage. So Chosen are absolutely excellent. I think the only downside is that they're in the same army as Varangard, and Varangard are absolutely excellent. They're like Chosen, but on horses that move really fast. So they're like a little bit points dependent because they're sort of filling the same role, but otherwise they're just an excellent unit. So what are we? We're in a non-hero. It's going to be Chosen. Vanguard on foot. I meant to give them -2 because they're like the same as Vanguard, but I think the fact that they're on foot does separate them a little bit. I'm gonna just give them -1. I know that makes the scoring weird, but there's a significant difference here, or at least there could be a significant... Nah, fuck it. They are the same thing. You can get away with not taking Chosen or not taking Vanguard. You can just sort of do either. Vanguard are usually more reliable because they move faster, so they've got a better delivery mechanism. With Chosen, you have to use tricks like the bridge, or you have to use the other thing that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But Vanguard usually just get there. Sorry, the 3d6 charge. That's what I'm thinking of with the Vanguard, the Chosen. See, I'm just getting them mixed up. They're too similar. Anyway, we got Chaos Warriors. And they got 5-inch move, 2 health, 3 up save, 1 control. Their weapons are actually surprisingly good, with 2 attacks, 3 threes, 1 rend, 1 damage, and crit auto wound. Then they get an extra attack if they're contesting an objective that you control. In general, these guys are pretty grindy. They take the Nurgle mark really well. Some of the other marks are okay on them as well, but most of the time I think you're going to see Warriors with a Nurgle mark, because these guys' job most of the time is they are very durable. They stand on a point. It's going to be their point. And they'll hold that for the whole game. If you can very early, like turn 1 or 2, put these guys in the mid board, actually your opponent might have a really hard time dealing with them. They're one of the few sort of amble units that I think is, they got enough damage that they can actually, they can be pretty grindy and deal with things that your opponents throw at them, but they're also durable enough that your opponent's going to have a really, really hard time trying to take them out in one go. And you can back them up with things like Chosen and Vanguard. I think Warriors are okay. They do have this weird, like they are very points dependent. If in the previous edition they had the same sort of thing, they're just slightly too expensive to be used as chaff, and then not quite enough damage to be used as a hammer. It really depends on how much damage your opponent can output and how much rend and mortal wounds there are in the game. I think in previous editions, there was so much damage that Warriors weren't enough of an anvil to absorb any damage, weren't enough of a hammer to do any damage, and were too expensive to be chaff. But I think they do fill a role now where they're kind of, it's a bit like Liberators, where they're good enough that your opponent can't just chuck chaff on a point, because the Warriors can deal with them, or they can't take a point off your Warriors with chaff. They have to commit something, a real unit, but they're not as expensive as a real unit themselves. They're not a 310 point unit of Vanguard, but they will make their opponent commit something like that to take them off an objective. So I think Warriors are okay. I'll leave them in the good category, even though they're pretty basic. Actually, there's a lot of Slaves to Darkness stuff that feels like this. But this job is a really simple job. So very durable. Good at their job. They want to like stand around on points and take points and stuff, and they're generally pretty good at it. So I like Warriors. Then you've got a Chaos Spawn. This thing is like vestigial. You used to sometimes, when you rolled on the Either Gods chart, you roll a double one, whatever, and your guy would turn into a Chaos Spawn, and that was the entire purpose of this thing. Now it is pointless, and it's ugly. So they should have just squatted it. I don't know why it's still in here. Is it a hero? Please hope not. No, it's a beast. All right. Chaos Spawn. Should have been squatted. It's just not good. All right, Chaos Knights. They got a 10-inch move, 3-up save, and they went up to 4 wounds, which is a really big deal. It's good for things like power through and stuff, but in general means that 5 knights have the same wounds as 10 warriors. So if you give them the Mark of Nurgle, they are equally as much of an anvil as the warriors are. They do a fair bit of damage on the charge, not as much as Varangard. They've got just a ton of health. I think, again, the only problem with knights is that they fit that weird middle point where if you want a real hammer, you probably just take Varangard. So they're kind of like a mobile anvil, I suppose. But if your opponents can do enough damage, then they don't even do that job really well. They're just like an expensive unit that doesn't do enough damage. So, I don't know. I think if I gave Varangard and Chosen are too similar, I think Knights are possibly a bit similar. It's the same sort of thing here. You've got like slow anvils, fast anvils, and slow hammers and fast hammers. But another way to look at it, I suppose, is like Varangard are good heavy cavalry and Knights are bad heavy cavalry. Chosen are good heavy infantry and Warriors are bad heavy infantry. I don't know. I play an army that has 2 units of Knights and Chosen and Warriors, and I feel like Knights are a good pinning unit. You sort of like, what's the word? I think it's called alpha bunker or something. Or alpha pinning. You can charge these in, do a bunch of damage, and because they're so durable, they got so many wounds, you can really lock your opponent in their deployment zone. And they do that a lot better than Varangard do. Varangard don't have quite the same level of durability. So I think they're distinct enough. Kind of fast compared to Warriors. So these two I reckon are distinct enough. These two are definitely standing on each other's toes a little bit. There's not that much reason to take Chosen over Varangard. Yeah, I don't know. I'm unsure about this one, but whatever. We're going to move on. The Mutalith Vortex Beast. Okay, it's got a 10-inch move, 14 health, and a 4-up save, so it's not super durable. It's got control 5, it has some attacks. It's not a lot of output in close combat. It loses some damage when it's battle damaged, and it heals D3 every hero phase. And then it has this once per turn army rampage. So pick a visible enemy unit within 12 of this unit to be the target, roll a dice and apply the corresponding effect below. If this unit is wholly within 12 of a friendly Tzeentch wizard, you can roll 2 dice instead and pick either result. All right. On a 1, nothing. Fantastic. On a 2, Hideous Disfigurement, subtract 3 from the target's control score. On a 3, the target cannot use commands for the rest of the turn. On a 4, you subtract 1 from the target's move characteristic for the rest of the battle. On a 5, you do D6 mortal damage and then heal D6. And then on a 6, you get to pick the effect. The fact that these are random makes them much harder to use. Like, what is the situation where you roll the 2, it subtracts 3 from the target's control score, and it also happens to matter at the same time. Like, the fact that you don't know you're going to get this ability just means it's very unlikely that this 3 is going to matter. Similar for the commands thing. What is it? It's a unit within 12. So you could try and stop a counter charge or something, but you can't rely on it. Subtract 1 from the move characteristic is a very, very small debuff, especially since you have to get so close to do it. And then maybe you do D6 mortals, and maybe that's a decent amount. This thing has to be ungodly cheap to be good. what is it? A Mutalith Vortex Beast. 190. I still think no. You can get like a unit of warriors for the same price. And the warriors have like 20 wounds on a 3-up save and a bunch of decent attacks and like an ability that works. And I don't think you want this. It also has to have the Zinch mark, so it doesn't get any Mark of Chaos. It just gets the weird spell ignore thing. It's a bad non-hero. Mutalith Vortex Beast. Meh. Unreliable bonuses. Kind of meh. Then we got the Slaughter Brute, which is the Khorne version of the same thing. I think this one might be a little bit better. It's got a 10-inch move, 14 wound, 4-up save, so same sort of profile. Hits a fair bit harder, but still not excellent. Then battle damaged, it drops down actually a fair number of its good attacks. So I guess that sucks for this thing. Once per turn army, any charge phase, you got the Rampaging Charge. If this unit charged this phase, pick an enemy unit within 1 inch of it to be the target. Roll a d3 on a 2+ inflicted amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. If the target is infantry, do double damage. Okay, so he's like an anti-infantry specialist. He's got extra rend against infantry and does extra mortals against infantry. Then in the deployment phase, you can pick a Slaves to Darkness hero within this unit's combat range to be the unit's master for the rest of the battle. While this unit is within its master's combat range, add 1 to the number of dice rolled when making charge rolls for this unit to a maximum of 3. Okay, I was going to say, it has a bit of a hard time getting into combat because it only moves 10. So, like, to get towards your infantry targets, doesn't have run or charge or anything, but it does have a 3 dice charge. That's kind of neat. You do have to do this in the deployment phase, so it doesn't look like you could do... they have to be in combat range in the deployment phase. So you can't put them in the Silver Tower and then declare a hero, then drop them in and charge them 3d6 on the battlefield. They do sort of have to start on the battlefield. You could use things like the bridge, but then your hero has to be up there as well, and you can't use 2 units on the bridge at once. I just, like, if he's cheap enough, you could put him in lists. But then we're like in a race to the bottom situation. Like, this doesn't do anything. It's just stats. This is kind of something, like, if there was enough good stuff going on, the fact that he can charge 3d6 is kind of interesting. But then because of the restriction of being near a hero, it kind of shuts off, and having to declare it in the deployment phase and all that sort of stuff, shuts off all the tools that you have to, like, deep strike this guy and then charge out of deep strike or anything. There is a neat, keeping him behind a unit and then using him as a counter charger is kind of neat because of that long charge distance. But I mean, I think you'd be better off with like a Demon Prince or something that can fly and something that does a bit more damage. I just don't think this thing has any stats on it for the kind of thing that it is. It doesn't really do anything if it doesn't have the stats. So it's a bit better than the Mutalith, in my opinion, though. I don't know if I should put it up in... I'll put it in mediocre. I still think it's bad. But... nah, fuck it. It's bad. I'm never going to take one of these things. I don't think you should take one of these things. I don't think anyone should take one of these things. I don't know why it's in this army. So, I'm being generous if I say it's mediocre. No stats to do anything with its 3d6 charge. Yeah. The Centurion Marshal. I really, really like this model, but I don't think he's any good. So he's a Ruinous Champion, which I guess is important to understand. He won't always take up a drop, but you've got an 8-inch move, 10 health, a 4-up save, so he's got an okay sort of amount of health. He's cavalry, so he doesn't get the good guarded hero. He's got 6 attacks, 3 threes, 1 rend, 2 damage with charge plus 1 damage. So not as much damage as the Myrmidon guy or the Demon Prince. Probably similar to that Exalted Hero. His only ability is he's got one of them activates an undivided unit. So you have to mark one of the units as undivided, and they get +1 to hit rolls. So almost a blank War Scroll. Oh, what have I've lost my... So he's a hero, he's a bad hero. Centurion Marshal. Blank War Scroll. Centurion? Okay. I also think he probably overlaps. I have to do this. He overlaps with some other stuff. He's not doing anything particularly unique. Definitely, it's the same sort of role that like a Chaos Lord fits. Why is this different to this? Okay, doesn't matter. Yeah, he sort of does the same thing that a Chaos Lord does, or that any of these, like the Dark Earth Chieftain or whatever, all of these sorts of units. I'm very tempted to put the -2 on all of them. I know that they're separated out, that the like Chaos Lord on Demonic Mount is the cavalry one, the Chaos Lord on foot is the infantry, the like Chaos Warriors of Chaos infantry one, the Dark Oath do the Dark Oath thing, Centurion Marshal is, I guess, undivided. I don't know. You can double up on that. Wherever you're taking this guy, you will have a different option. So if you're taking it for a Dark Oath thing, you've got the same option on the Dark Oath Chieftain. If you're taking it for any of the Warriors of Chaos guys, you've got the Chaos Lords for them. He's just sort of doubling up and doing the same job that other things are doing, and not doing it particularly well. So it's a shame because this model is really, really cool, but yeah, just doesn't do anything. Chaos Legionnaires. So these are the Be'lakors sort of guys, and they're basically chaff. They're comparable to Chaos Marauders. I think they're 90 points. So they've got a 5-inch move, 1 health, and a 4-up save, which I think might actually be a little bit better than the Marauders. I think that Marauders might be on a 5-up. They got Dark Iron weapons of 3s, 4s, 1, and 1 damage. So they actually get that rend. The Marauders have to like make an 8-up charge to get the rend. These guys just have the rend. I think one downside is I'm pretty sure they come in a unit of 8, not a unit of 10. And then they've got this So Confusion. Once per turn army, your movement phase, pick an enemy unit within 6 of this to be the target, roll a dice on a 4+, the target cannot use commands for the rest of the turn. A bit weird that it has to be in the movement phase, but for chaff, this is a surprisingly good ability. Your chaff often stands around doing nothing because their job is to be a speed bump, like the enemy charges into them, spends a turn fighting them, or like to stand on an objective and like score it to score battle tactics or whatever. And once they've done like scoring a battle tactic, often they're like not doing anything. So like an ability like this is actually kind of useful on the type of unit this is. You do have to get very close. And with combination with Eternus has a 4-up command anti-command thing, and these guys have a 4-up anti-command thing as well. It is only your movement phase, and if you spam Chaos Legionnaires, you can only use the So Confusion once per turn. So I don't know, it's not very strong, but given that these guys' job is basically Chaos Marauders, I actually think these are fine. These are like a good unit for chaff. And if you want chaff, like it's not an issue taking them, especially because they get the extra armor save. So even though they have 2 fewer wounds in the unit, they like make up for it a little bit. So I think they're fine. What are they called? Chaos Legionnaires or something like that. Decent chaff with an ability. Raptorix. These things move 10. They've got 2 health and a 6 up save. 3 attacks each, 4s and 4s. No rend 1 damage companion. They're beasts. And if they charge, they add an extra attack. How many points are these things? I have a feeling you can't reinforce them either. Raptorix. Oh no, you can reinforce them. You get 6 of them for 90 points. So what's that? Maybe you get 4 attacks each if you reinforce the unit. It's actually a fair number of attacks, but they're all garbage. They do move quite quick, but then they have Beast. In my mind, the Raptorix are like the financial tax that you have to pay to get Furies. These come in the same box as Furies. They're like chaotic beasts, I think, for Warcry. Furies like make sense and do something. These guys are, I don't know, what are they meant to deal damage? They're not good at taking objectives. They're okay, I guess, at battle tactics because they move fairly quick, but they're not as good at not as good as Furies at doing battle tactics, which move further and have an actual relevant ability. I think that's the main thing. Comparing these things to Furies, they just don't do anything. They have like some attacks, but this unit is not the kind of unit you want to do damage. So I'm going to put them in bad. Raptorix. I'm realizing it's nothing that's sort of mediocre. Bad at fighting, worse at tactics than other. All right, I'll just call them bad, and then I'll probably call Furies good, and then won't say they overlap. There we go. We've got Furies. So Furies move 12. They have a 6 up save and 1 health. They only come in a unit of 6, same as those Raptorix. So they do die, I guess. Raptorix have 2 health each. So that's something, I suppose. If somebody breathes on the Raptorix, they might survive. Whereas Chaos Furies, they die to pretty much any shooting your opponent has at all. They also have pretty bad attacks. Actually, I'm noticing it's the same attacks that the Raptorix have. Furies get rend, whereas these guys get an extra attack on the charge. But these guys don't have companion, whereas these guys do. So actually, Furies do more damage. They're a little bit less durable, I suppose. So Raptorix are like better against enemy shooting. Furies are better against enemy melee. The main advantage of Chaos Furies is if this unit is in combat, roll a dice. On a 3+, this unit can immediately use the retreat ability as if it were your movement phase without any mortal damage being inflicted on it. Because of the timing, pretty much your opponent just has to roll the dice unless they've got shooting. It's very hard to deal with this unit. And because they're a nothing chaff unit, it doesn't cost you much to put this unit on the battlefield. It means that your opponent has to spend time dealing with something that you basically don't have to invest anything in. It's a very frustrating thing for your opponent to have to deal with. The old Fury rule was based on activation order. So I think the rule used to work like instead of fighting, they could retreat. So it meant that in your turn, you could charge your Furies in and then activate them first and retreat immediately. And you could like slingshot the Furies, which was kind of cool. But you had to not be activating with other units, right? If you charged in the Furies and then charged your Chosen in somewhere else, you'd probably want to activate your Chosen first, and then the Furies would get killed. So there was a bit of an opportunity cost in that you couldn't really do this slingshot strategy without giving up some of your sort of activation advantage. Same thing in the opponent's turn. They would have to activate first to kill the Furies, because if the Furies got to activate, they would leave combat. So it forced your opponent to spend their activation on killing a really useless unit, and what they would much rather do is try and kill your Chosen or something like that, and then fight the Furies later after the Furies have attacked. So I really, really liked the old timing of the ability. It just, it was more consistent and it was about play and counterplay. This one is very random. It just means that you're just rolling a dice. So So sometimes it just won't work. It'll be very frustrating, but there's a whole bunch of advantages for this. Like if your opponent doesn't have any shooting in their army, they might struggle to complete the battle tactic to kill this thing. If you put this in your general's regiment, for example. So if you're playing one of those lists I talked about where like it's a Be'lakor and a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, you put the Furies in your general's regiment. In those matchups where your opponent doesn't have any shooting or has very little shooting, they might struggle to kill one of these units because if they get in combat, just on a 3-up, they won't be in combat with it. It's after the charge phase, so they can't do anything about it. It's just a really interesting sort of conundrum for them. I don't like the design of it exactly, but the power level and like the fact they're really annoying to deal with, I think is thematic and all that sort of stuff. So I actually really, really like Furies. I'm big on Furies. And I suppose, I wonder if you stacked them up a little bit, if they could do some damage to a hero. Because they've got Undivided, they got the one rend there. If you gave them an all-out attack, nah, still probably not worth it. Just use them for battle tactics, which they're really good at because they move 12 and they fly. I'm going to put them in good. Actually, I'm going to move. I don't think Raptorics are like useless. I just think that they do the same thing Furies do, but not as good as Furies. So I'm probably going to get me some Furies. It also helps that there's only like 6 of them, so then you don't have to paint up a whole unit of Dark Oath guys. Yeah, I actually think this guy's kind of cool. Then we've got the Mind Stealer Spheranx. It moves 10. It's got 10 health. It has a 5-up save. It has control 5, which is sort of surprising, but it is a monster again. It briefly stopped being a monster when you got free monster abilities like Roar, but it's back to being a monster. It has like bad combat attacks and this ability. So once per turn army, any combat phase, you pick an enemy unit within 6 of this unit to be the target, roll a dice. If the roll exceeds the target's control characteristic, the target has strike last for the rest of the turn. That's a really powerful effect. It's powerful in that you can sort of bait your opponent as well. So you can have a unit and then the Spheranx right behind the unit. So when they charge in, this thing has a range of 6. So this thing doesn't even have to be in combat. It can sort of zap them and give them strikes last. Even just the threat that can happen is kind of neat. So I think this works as a tool. It doesn't work on everything. Obviously, if the control characteristic is really high, then this doesn't function. Like, it can only hit guys that have control characteristic like 1 or 2 pretty reliably. But that is a lot of units in the game have control characteristic 1 or 2. And even against guys that have... There's not many that have 3 or whatever. It's sort of 1 and 2, and then it jumps up to 5. So probably not very useful there. I think this is a neat tool that you could put in a list if it's cheap enough. At the moment, I think it's 170. So it's probably not worth it at the moment. But with the regiment options and stuff, it could fit in a surprising amount of regiments. And this is actually a really... really useful effect. So I don't think he's bad. I just think the points don't really add up. It'd be nice if he maybe did something else as well. I just put him as like good. Spheranx. Useless ability, but not. So the fact that that's the only thing it does, like it really has no damage at all, sort of means like when you're paying the points for this, you are buying specifically this thing, and it's a little bit situational and stuff for that. Like your opponent might be playing an army that doesn't care about this. Yeah, I think they could do something about that to like improve the general applicability of this. It could have something else that it can do. Or they could have 2 sides to this where like if it's got a low control characteristic, it gets strike last. But if you roll under the control characteristic, then it does mortal wounds or something like that. So that it's always doing something. I don't know. Then we've got the Fulmoroid Crusher. It's got 6 inches of movement, 8 health, and a 5-up save with 2 control. Oh, I should I should put this in Ancestral Junk. It is a, it's like a Warcry thing. I realized there's another thing. Centurion Marshal should probably go in there as well. He's bad. And maybe even the Raptorix and the Furies. So it might seem harsh to put them in like a section called junk, but it's not saying that they're useless or bad or anything. You can have bad junk. The point is that this is like not the core of the army. It's the Warcry stuff or the Underworld stuff or just things that are somehow playable, but they're not really a core part of the army for one reason or another. Could almost actually put the Soul Grinder in there as well, because I feel like this is just here because it's a 40k thing, not because it's an actual unit. What is going on with the formatting of this thing? This annoys me to no end. All right. Oh, and these two definitely fit there because they're old. So these guys are bad. What was I up to? The Fulmoroid Crusher. So I have to move these phalanx down here as well. Don't think I wrote this phalanx thing yet. Or I put it in the wrong section. Yes, I put a lot of these things in the wrong section. I think Legionnaires are a war band as well. Oh, I can't remember which thing I put them in. I do apologize. This is going to be frightfully boring to look at. But it's important for the integrity of my document. Oh, I did put it in junk. Nice. All right. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. The Fulmoroid Crusher has like a bad ranged attack and a couple okay attacks. Nothing great. He's got once per turn. His rampage is pick a terrain feature within one of this unit, then pick each other unit, friendly and enemy, within 3 of that terrain feature to be the targets. I think when it says other here, it means other than the Fulmoroid Crusher, not other than the terrain. Roll a d3 for each target. On a 2+ inflict an amount of mortal damage on the target equal to the roll. So he goes up to some terrain piece and shakes it. And all the rocks and stuff fall down from it and hit the nearby things. He'd have to be so cheap for this to be worth it. Probably too cheap. So I just think he's like a bad... meh. Like, I don't like terrain stuff at the best of times, but this is the role this guy is filling is light chip damage. There's no like build around strategy. You can't like do something with the terrain because you took a Fulmoroid Crusher. He just like does a little bit of damage. How much does he cost? He's got to be like 50 points. No, 150. I just don't think you bother. All right. Then we're on to... Oh, wait. I say we're on to endless spells, but the book doesn't actually end at the endless spells, does it? It's still got... Yeah, still got units after it. I have no idea why they do this. So for all of these endless spells, they'll set up in 12, and I think the ones that move 9. And I don't think I care about their casting value, but I might just quickly have a look and see if there's any information. So 777, that's all fine. They're all kind of hard to cast in your opponent's turn, but okay to cast in your own turn. Yeah, they all summon in 12, and the ones that move summon 9 away. I don't think there's anything particularly interesting about any of that. All right, so Realm Scourge Rupture is a 9 move, 6 health, 5 up save, 7+ to banish. It has like some melee attacks, but they do almost nothing, like 2d3 with 1 damage. It's not going to do much in combat. Any charge phase, debilitating shockwave. If this manifestation charged this phase, pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of it to be the target. Roll a dice for each model in the target unit. For each 6, inflict 1 mortal damage on the target. If any models in this unit are slain by this ability, subtract 1 from hit rolls for the target's attacks for the rest of the turn. So this thing can't countercharge because it's a manifestation. It just charges something, does almost no damage, and then if you kill something, so you can't even get the -1 to hit on a unit that, like if you charge into some Varangard or something like that, you're not going to kill one, so you're not going to get the -1 to hit. There's not that many situations where I'm interested in dealing 1 mortal wound on a 6 for each model in the unit, and where I care about the 1 to hit rolls. Like if a unit has 40 models in it, then its attacks are often super bad anyway, and I don't care about how much damage it's doing. And if it has that many models in the unit, then it's not going to care about mortal wounds either. Like these abilities don't make any sense to me. I wouldn't bother casting this. It's not making me take the lore. So Realm Scourge Rupture, it's ancillary because all of the manifestations are. It doesn't do anything. It's like anti-horde and anti good attack profile, but bad at both. It's just not very good. The 8-fold Doom Sigil. It's got 6 health and 5 up save. If 2 or more units, friendly or enemy, were destroyed this turn, for the rest of the turn, add 1 to the attack's characteristic of melee weapons used by friendly Slaves to Darkness units that are wholly within 12 of this manifestation. So what? So 2 units have to have died, and then you get the buff. How did 2 units die in Age of Sigmar? Obviously, you have to like spend some time fighting. Like you activate, maybe you kill something with your first activation. You're playing Slaves to Darkness. You have no shooting, and then they activate. Maybe they kill one of your units. Neat. Okay, like that triggers your 8-fold Doom Sigil. Then you get this buff. Do you even have something else to activate that's within 12? This is like impossible to use. And in your opponent's turn, they're going to control the charges and stuff. It's like, this is never going to happen. Doom Sigil. Doom to be on the shelf, I guess. It's not good. You're never going to cast this. And it just gives your opponent something to charge. I just think it's terrible. I don't bother. Darkfire Demon Rift. got a 9-inch move, 6 health, and a 6 up save with the 7+ to banish. It does d6 attacks with 2 3s, 1 1, so not a ton of damage. It'll do like 1 or 2. And then in melee, it's also not doing anything. Then it's got a passive. Each time a spell is cast by a unit within 12 of this manifestation, give it 1 ruinous energy point to a maximum of 6. Each time this manifestation uses a shoot ability, add 1 to the attack's characteristic for each ruinous energy point it has. If it is removed from play, all its ruinous energy points are lost. So let's imagine you're trying to make this work. You've got like Be'lakor and a Gaunt Summoner, and you cast 4 spells. The first one is you cast the Darkfire Demon Rift, but I suppose it wouldn't get this because it doesn't exist at the time the spell is successfully cast. So you set this thing up, and then you cast your 3d6 to charge spell on something, and you cast a different manifestation. Not that you want either of the other manifestations in this lore, but you know, you've taken it because we're casting Darkfire Demon Rift. So you're using the Gaunt Summoner to summon one of the other things, and then you're also going to use, I don't know, the Gaunt Summoner's other ability, let's say. So you successfully cast 3 things. It gets 3 extra attacks, so it's like d6 plus 3. And it still does almost nothing. Like, let's say d6 plus 3 is 6, so it'll hit 5 of them and like wound 3 of them, maybe 4 of them. They'll save a couple of them, so it'll do like 2 damage. And it's range 8, so you can't set it up and shoot it. No. I really don't like units that have like a ton of setup that don't do anything with all that setup. Like, yeah, you have to put so much investment into this. No, just I can't be bothered. That's really bad. You don't take this lore. You take the bridge so that you can make your guys charge 3d6 and then teleport them across the table, or you take like Morbid Conjuration or something, just something else. You're never going to take the Slaves to Darkness lore. I don't really see a reason to. Then we've got the Nexus Chaotica. This is your like terrain thing. It has cover and impassable. Your hero phase, draw power, roll a dice, and give it a number of power points equal to the roll. It can only have 12 at once. In your hero phase, you can declare this. If this feature has 3 or more power points, pick a friendly Slaves to Darkness wizard within 3 to be the target. Remove 3 power points from the terrain feature and add 1 to casting rolls for the target for the rest of the turn. That's not bad, I suppose. Like, you could, I think, my understanding of the terrain rules is that you have to be 3 away from other terrain. But if you have a place of power, you could set this thing up 3 inches away from the place of power and put the wizard between them. So you can draw on both things at once, and that might actually give you +2 to cast or something like that. Or if you're using quite a large wizard, like if you've got like Be'lakor, he's got a really big base. So you could set them up in a way that you can fit Be'lakor sort of between them. It does squish your army up a fair bit because this thing is quite big and it's impassable. But being able to give like +2 to cast is kind of neat, especially since you have good spells like 3d6 to charge. So that's not too bad. The fact that this thing is big is really annoying because that gives your opponent lots of area to charge. But I guess because it's impassable as well, they can't like get on it. So it also blocks things a fair bit as well. So I don't know. It's got this other ability, Corrupt the Realms. If it has 9 or more power points, pick an objective or terrain feature within 24 of this terrain feature to be the source. So not wholly within, just within 24. I suppose you want to be careful when you're setting this up to measure out all of the terrain that you could use for Corrupt the Realms. Then pick a number of enemy units within any number of enemy units within 3 inches of the source to be the targets. Remove 9 power points from this terrain feature. Okay, so it doesn't like drain the entire pool. You just remove the number that you get. So if you roll a big 6, then you can give yourself +1 to cast and do it again next turn and build up points over time. That's kind of neat. Bit of a shame you can't use these in the enemy hero phase, given that you're spending points. You could just generate them in your phase and then spend them in either phase, but oh well. And then you do D3 mortal wounds to each thing. Actually, actually don't mind this. I think it's kind of good, actually. I'm not a big fan of terrain, but Nexus, Chaotica. I was very sad that we lost our 3d6 to cast from Kabbalists. And this doesn't, it's not the same thing, certainly, but +1 to cast is nice. And a lot of people lost casting bonuses in general. There's a lot less powerful wizards around. So, what does it do? +1 to cast sometimes, and mortal wound bomb other times. I think it's nice that it has the 2 modes because this is a bit too situational. But in some situations, like if you've got the power points and your opponent is standing next to the terrain, and you could get like 3d3 mortal wounds, like, I don't know, it's kind of neat. But mostly I'm just looking at it for this. It's a big thing that just gives you +1 to cast. I'm happy about that. Reminds me a bit of the pizza oven in Fire Slayers. Dark Oath Wilder Fiend. So this is the thing that comes in that Dark Oath box. It looks a bit like a Chaos Spawn. It's got an 8-inch move, 9 health, 5 up save, and 1 control. It's a Flesh Tearing Maw and Razor Sharp Claws are like, It does like some damage, but not a ton. It's a beast, so it has a control score of 1. Each time a model, friendly or enemy, is slain within 12 of this unit, give this unit a sacrifice point to a maximum of 6. And it runs over and eats the bones or something. If there are more than 1 friendly Dark Oath Wilder Fiend units within 12 of the slain model, only 1 can be given the sacrifice point. So you can't eat the same bones twice. Okay, fair enough. Your hero phase primal sorcery effect. Pick one of the following effects. You can do Mind Shroud. Pick an enemy unit within 12 of this to be a target and roll a number of dice equal to the number of sacrifice points this unit has. If any of the rolls are a 5 up, the target cannot use commands for the rest of the turn. Okay, so you like build up 2 or 3, but even if you only have like 1 sacrifice point, that's not nothing. All right, on a 5 up, they can't use commands. You always reset your points back to 0, so even if you're unsuccessful on your rolls, you still go back to 0, which is a bit unfortunate. Or you can pick Warping Balefire, pick an enemy unit within 12 to be the target, and roll a number of dice equal to the number of sacrifice points for each 3+, inflict 1 mortal damage. Okay, so you've got like 2 outlets, and they're fairly different outlets. Like this one is stops them using commands, which is situationally quite powerful. And this one does some mortal wounds, and could be like 4 mortal wounds if you've got all 6 sacrifice points, which is not out of the realm of possibility because if the friendly models near this guy die, like anywhere within 12, that's not bad. You'll be able to use that every now and then. Dark Might, heal X this unit where X is the number of points. You don't have to roll or anything. That's kind of neat. It's not super important to keep this guy alive. He's got a water 5 up. I guess that's nice. He's got to be very, very cheap. This guy does not do much. He's a bit like the Mind Stealer's Phalanx or the Fomeroid Crusher. I don't mind any of these like random little beastie dudes, but they got to be like 70 points or something to bother taking them. They're real weird. I do like, just design-wise, I like that Feed on Flesh stops you from taking a bunch of them, because having abilities like this means that you can make them super cheap and not risk that people just take 30 of them in an army, and that it's like a horrible nightmare to play against, because the main thing that they do only works if there's like only 1 or 2 of them. So Dark Oath Wilder Fiend, 190. The fuck are they smoking? He like doesn't do much. I get that this is turning off commands can be good, but you have to like work for it. You guys have to die for it. It's only your hero phase. You can't use it in your opponent's turn. Healing him is not that important, and the damage isn't going to be huge. I'm not sure what they see in this dude. It's not a big deal that he's a beast, because he would only have like control score 2 anyway. I don't know. I'm tempted to put him in the ancillary junk old. He feels like a hanger-on thing to me, just like that Mind Stealer's Phalanx and that Fomeroid Crusher. In fact, I'm going to do it. I know he's a new thing and he's in like the new release box, but he just feels like he should be here. What is he? The Dark Oath. Will the Fiend. I don't know what they're doing with this. Collect bones and cancels commands or does a couple mortals. It's not a hero, right? It's not a monster either. It just takes up a slot in a regiment. Yeah, I don't think this is reliable enough to take him as like a bit of technology in your army to shut off commands. He's just like, if you have the model, you won't feel horrible about including him, but not at 190 points. I think you will feel horrible about that. So points dependent, I suppose. I can't remember if I put these guys in the right spot. I keep changing my mind about where the Legionnaires should be, but actually I do think they're good. I'm going to give them the -2 though, because they do the same thing that Chaos Marauders do. Okay, the Dark Oath Chieftain. We've got 7 health, 12-inch move, and a 4+ save with 2 control. He has some attacks, not great. It's actually the same as the guy on foot, and then he's got a horse that does nothing. So actually has a terrible profile. He's a cavalry war leader, so you can reroll charge rolls for friendly Dark Oath cavalry units while they're wholly within 12, including himself. The only Dark Oath cavalry unit there is are the Fell Riders, and I don't think you want to invest a whole bunch into them doing damage because they don't do that much damage. Once per battle, end of any turn. He's got the Oath of Murder. If he destroyed an enemy hero or monster, he gets strike first. So he's the same as like the foot guy, but instead of having a weird +1 to hit or +1 to wound or whatever, he has this reroll charges, which is slightly better. He'd have to be basically free for me to take him. Was he the Dark Oath War Leader? Warsteed? Chieftain on Warsteed? 180. Nah. This is such a shame. I really like this whole Dark Oath box. I like the Chieftain, the War Queen. I like the new Marauders. I like the Fell Riders. This is such a tax. You have to pay a bunch of points for these heroes that don't do anything. Reroll charges is kind of neat, but I don't know. Maybe I'm not understanding how much damage the army does. Maybe if you build like a whole army of these Fell Riders, like they work, and the rerolling a charge is really, really valuable. I don't know. I won't put him in bad because he doesn't have that stupid this guy fights and then he makes the Fell Riders fight and they get like +1. This is actually something. This is not. This is useless, but this is okay. Rerolling charges for him and his cavalry guys. That's an okay buff. So he is a hero. And he's not good. I'll just put him in mediocre. So Dark Oath Chieftain on horse. Reroll charges for Fell Riders and self. All right. We're on to Dark Oath Marauders. These guys I'm pretty hopeful for, but I have a feeling they have like a poison pill on the Warscroll that kind of ruins them. So we've got 5-inch move, 1 health, 5+ save, 1 control. You do get 10 of them for 100 points, so they're sort of just a chaff unit. They've got raider weapons, 2 attacks, 4s, 3s, no rend 1 damage, so they're not doing a whole bunch of damage. But if they make a really long charge, an 8 up, then they get 1 to their rend characteristic for the rest of the battle. That's kind of neat. I think you can combine this with things like the 3d6 to charge. So if you've got like a reinforced unit of Dark Oath Marauders and you want to fairly reliably make them have the oath fulfilled, you can use the spell to give them 3d6 to charge. You can't make them Slanesh and use the War Shrine because they're forced to be undivided, but the spell does work on them, I'm pretty sure. And when they've got the rend, they actually do an okay amount of damage. Then they've got Glorious Death. Well, while this unit is wholly within 12 inches of any friendly Dark Oath heroes, each time a model in this unit is slain by a combat attack and that model was in combat with the attacking unit, roll a dice on a 5-up, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. This should be really, really good because the purpose of chaff is to die. The problem is it has to be wholly within 12 of any friendly Dark Oath heroes. And as we've seen, pretty much all the Dark Oath heroes are total garbage, and there isn't a point to taking any of them. This might enable them as a unit, so I think the design philosophy here is you take them as chaff in a normal Slaves to Darkness list, and in that list, you don't really worry about reinforcing them. You don't want to put buffs on them to make them get the rend. They're just 10 idiots that stand around and capture objectives and do battle tactics, right? In the Dark Oath army, right, when you're building an actual Dark Oath army, you might reinforce this unit, so there's 20 of them. You can put the spell on them and make them charge 3d6, so they get their oath. They'll do a fair bit of damage. When they die, hopefully you've got a hero nearby because you're playing a whole Dark Oath army. So I think actually as a mainstay, the sort of modal operation of the unit is sort of clever design, but it's really sad from my perspective, where I'm not interested in playing an entire Dark Oath army. I just wanted to include maybe 2 units of Marauders, but I can't really do that. And it's the same thing with their... I can do it, but they're just chaff. So they're competing with Furies or with those Legionnaires or something like that. And if you look at the battle formation for Dark Oath, I think it has the same requirement. They have to have a hero. You just have to have one on the battlefield, I'm pretty sure. But you have to take a Dark Oath hero to use the ability. And if you look at the other battle formations, God's Wrath is not doing a ton for you. And Despoilers does nothing. The Legion of Chaos pretty much does nothing as well. So it'd be kind of neat to just be able to take 2 units of Marauders, then take the Marauder subfaction and be able to have some replacements of those 2 units of Marauders. I don't have to go all the way into building a Marauder-only barbarian-based army. I can just have some chaff and get some extra units of chaff. And if anything, I can build a list that has a couple really big reinforced units of Chosen and Warriors, and then I'm supplementing my board presence by using some cheap units and getting some replacements out of my battle formation. But I can't really do that because you need the Dark Oath heroes, and that adds to your drops. It doesn't really do anything for your army at all. You're paying points for the Dark Oath heroes, and they do pretty much nothing. So just the way it falls, the fact that you need Dark Oath heroes for this ability, the fact that all the Dark Oath heroes kind of suck, I think that ruins the entire Dark Oath half of Slaves to Darkness. It's very, very disappointing. Even makes me want to, when I look back at the battle formation, think I don't really understand what you're supposed to do, because so many of these abilities rely on you just paying the tax of taking these really, really mediocre or bad heroes. So anyway, ignoring that for a little bit, I'm going to assume I don't have this ability. It's quite a good ability in the Dark Oath army and probably worth, if you've got, they're not expensive heroes. You can stick a chieftain near them for 120 points, and it turns on Glorious Death. That, with a reinforced unit, these guys for 200 points, that's actually splashing back 7 mortal wounds. That's quite a lot, really. And you could... plausibly, you could have 2 units of these Marauders. You could have 40 of them next to the one hero. So it's not unworkable when you're trying to do the army. It's just a disappointment that those Dark Oath heroes are not very good. When you're not using them in a Dark Oath army, I just don't think they do anything. They're kind of they're chaff. They're okay chaff for 100 points that you get 10 bodies, but compared to your other options like Furies or Legionnaires get the rend, and they have that ability, so every now and then they could turn off a command or something like that. It just sort of leaves them without a place. And I think my idea of a Chaos Army, especially from 3rd edition, you used to play with the Warcry Warband, and they're all just a group of barbarians, pretty much. They're all cult weird barbarians, but they're just a group of barbarians pretty much. It feels on theme to me that you have this, the whole army is based around the path to glory, right? The Eye of the Gods slowly building you up into the ultimate warrior. You start off as some guy who has just gone along to the warband and you're just fighting to please the gods. And as you get better and better at combat, you earn their favor and you earn more spoils of war. You become like a chaos warrior. You get your black armor. You become a chaos lord, so on. It feels like Marauders are a core part of the theme and idea of the army, but it's so easy to just ignore them and not put them in, which is a shame because I really like the models. I was really excited to buy some and paint them up, but I just feel like they're not going to do anything in my army, so I probably won't end up getting them, especially because I need to pay those the hero tax sort of thing. So like, I'm not sure. I think I put him in mediocre. It's a bit hard because they do the same thing as Legionnaires, but not in the Dark Oath army. In the Dark Oath army, they're kind of different. So in the normal Slaves to Darkness army, Legionnaires and Chaos Marauders are very, very similar. In the Dark Oath army, Dark Oath Marauders are very, very different. And you definitely want the Marauders. So I'm not 100% certain where to put these guys. I think I'll just put them in mediocre. Yeah, I wish they were more applicable. So okay with some support, but you don't want to support them most of the time. So they're just okay. Yeah, they don't do anything interesting unless you're playing them as like a Dark Oath army, or if you take the Dark Oath hero for some reason and then like 2 units of these guys. Maybe I should try that out. Like maybe 2 units of but then you have to like stick them all together and they want to be off in their own direction doing like battle tactics. I don't know. All right. Dark Oath Savages. These are a Warcry warband. So Marauders are not. Savagers are. I think it's hilarious that they're called Savagers. They're not savages. They are people who savage you. Savagers. Leviosa, not Leviosa. We've got 5-inch movement, 1 health, 5 up save, 1 control. So they're very, very similar to Marauders. They've got 2 attacks, 4 3s, no rend, 1 damage. But instead of having the like getting rend on the charge, they just have a crit mortal straight out. Then you've got once per battle, any hero phase, Oath of Conquest. If this unit is contesting an objective you control that is wholly within enemy territory, this unit has ward 5 up for the rest of the battle. I actually think this is what I want Marauders to be. I suppose if you're playing the Marauder army, you take actual Marauders. If you're playing Dark Oath Marauders. And then if you're just using these guys as chaff, you just want like 10 idiots to stand on an objective. Hey, this is actually quite good. Crit Mortal means they will do some amount of damage against any target. Oath of Conquest means they'll be surprisingly durable if they manage to stand on an enemy objective. Other than that, they're cheap chaff guys. You don't want to reinforce them. So like in the Dark Oath Marauders army, you definitely want to reinforce these guys. Well, not definitely, but you want to support them. You want a hero near them, and you want to get this rend. So reinforcing them makes sense in the Dark Oath army. These guys can't be reinforced because they're a Warcry warband. So actually, I think the existence of this makes me change my mind about Marauders. I actually think Marauders are good. Yeah. In the Dark Oath army. And then we've got like Dark Oath. Oh, I have to... These are ancillary junk dudes. I actually think Dark Oath Savages. Good chaff. Right? This to me is a good looking chaff war scroll. They like fulfill their job pretty well. They're got to be cheap. They'll be like 100 points, I'm pretty sure. Dark Oath Savages. Oh, 130. Okay, that's a bit of a shame. I'd prefer them if they were like 100. Oh well. Crit Mortal and getting a 5-up ward if they contest an objective in enemy territories. They're just sort of neat abilities for a chaff unit to have. Sometimes get a ward. Have Crit Mortals. The damn. It is weird that this unit of like, these are really feral people, and they have mortals, and then these guys are like a bit more of an organized force. Worse. I think that's pretty funny. You can tell like these guys only have a champion. These guys have the champion musician, standard bearer, and stuff. But I think in this rare situation, I actually like the fact that they have these options. If you're playing that Dark Oath army, you play the Marauders, and if you're not playing a Dark Oath army, you probably play the Savages. The price point is pretty annoying because Chaos Warriors, for example, are 200 points, and Chaos Knights are 250. So 130 means that you can't like swap out 1 unit of Knights for 2 units of Savages, or 1 unit of Warriors for 2 units of Savages. You have to pay the extra points. So the Warscroll is fine. I just think the points are a bit wrong, maybe. And all of these ratings are on the Warscroll design. Okay, we got Dark Oath Fell Riders. They move 12 with 3 health and a 5-up save. They either have a javelin or a sword. If they've got the javelin, they have a shooting attack that's range 10 that's probably going to miss, but does D3 damage if it gets through. If they have the sword, they have +1 to wound. They actually lose a rend in melee, but then they get charge +1 damage. So I assume they do a little bit more damage on the charge, and then the Marauder Javelins do more damage outside of that situation most of the time, if you get the attack and all that sort of stuff. Once per battle, any charge phase, they've got Oath of the Raider. If this unit charges phase and is only in combat with 1 enemy unit, and that enemy unit is only in combat with this unit, add 1 to the rend characteristic of this unit's weapons for the rest of the battle. Worth pointing out that it's not just the melee weapons, it's all of their weapons. So their javelins will get them if they end up not in combat later on. I think you probably take the swords, but I actually don't mind both options here because I'm not sure they do enough damage that you want them charging in. I feel like they could handle enemy chaff, but no real enemy units. Like they're pretty light on damage. You only have 5 of them in a unit, I think. Then they've got swift attackers, subtract 1 from hit rolls for shooting attacks that target this unit. That's quite neat. They don't have a great armor save, but they do have 3 wounds each. So 1 unit of Fell Riders is 15 wounds with -1 to be hit by shooting attacks. They move really, really, really quickly. I think these are excellent chaff. The light cavalry got a lot better in the new book as far as chaff, because of coherency being so tight. So taking like 10 Savages or 10 Marauders or something like that, they only take up a really small space on the board, and they don't actually, they don't move that quick either. So it's hard to get them like out of your territory for things like take the flanks, right? You want fast moving chaff. So light cavalry, for a whole bunch of reasons, are really, really, really useful compared to the normal sort of chaff. So I actually really rate these guys. There's nothing bad about this Warscroll. They get the extra little bit of rend, which is pretty good, especially if I suppose if you've got the broadswords for +1 damage. They soak up shooting attacks a little bit better, which is when I'm thinking of playing like Furies. Really, what I'm going to do with the Furies is move them up the side of the board for take the flanks. Your opponent probably does just want to shoot the Furies so that they don't have to walk over to the flanks and charge them and then risk the Furies flying away. These guys are sort of the opposite. Your opponent can just go over and charge them and kill them, but that means your opponent has to walk all the way to the flanks of the board and then has to charge these guys, and they can like redeploy and stuff. Whereas if they want to shoot them, then they have to waste a lot of shooting power by, firstly, they're shooting at your chaff, which they don't really want to do. And because of things like swift attackers, the fact they've got 15 wounds in the unit, they're unlikely to kill this unit with just shooting attacks. So I actually really rate these guys. I think they're excellent and they're well designed. They work well in the book just in the normal Slaves to Darkness army, you don't have to worry about taking a hero or doing anything dumb to get them to work. They just function. The only downside is that they're like 150 points. So they're that same problem where you can't just like drop 5 Knights or 5 Chosen or something and fit in 2 units of these. When you're building your list, it's not that easy to shuffle the points around to find room for like 2 units of Fel Riders. But I actually really, really like them. I think they're great. So non-hero Fel Riders. Great chaff. Anti-shooting. It's welcome. Enough damage for fighting enemy chaff. So I think one thing in particular this season that they're going to end up doing is your opponent is also going to have chaff near the flanks. Both of you want to take the flanks. You want to do that battle tactic. And having one of these units like Fel Riders, which are a bit more powerful than some chaff units, especially like if they've got those broadswords on the charge, they'll actually do a little bit of damage. They're scary enough that they can fight off other chaff, and your opponent really has to commit real units to the flanks, which they don't want to do. I think this will just play really nicely compared to using some other units. So that, in addition to the good coherency, and they've got the full command and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot going for this unit. All right, we've got Abraxia. So I do want to check just straight away. Oh, this chick, she is not a War Master. I've been talking about how like if you take this character, then you have to put your chaff in here, but you don't. That's really neat. It's just Be'lakor and Archaon that do that. All right, worth the note. She's got movement 10, 14 health on 3-up saves, so fairly sort of standard monstery profile, 5 control, and she's got Gore Bulga with 5 attacks, 3 threes, rend 2, 2 damage, with anti-hero +1 rend and charge +1 damage. I think she's also forced to be undivided, so if you're fighting heroes, she'll be wounded on a 2-up here as well. That's actually pretty similar to like the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak or something, but I think she gets an extra point of rend, and then she's got this anti-hero +1 rend, which is significant. And then the Thanatorg's Claws and Fangs, it's got 6 attacks, 4 threes, 1 2. This is actually surprisingly close to the Chaos Lord on Karkadrak. It's not as smashy as I would have thought for the big 14 wound type of monster. Then she's got passive Warlord of the First Circle. If a friendly Varangard uses its Relentless Killer's ability while it's wholly within 12 of this unit, that unit does not have Strike Last as a result of that ability. It's not a super powerful buff. You kind of have to use this in combination with another ability for it to really matter, because, like, let's say it's your turn, you'll activate your Varangard and fight with them, and then they don't get Strikes Last, but you still have to pick them again later in the turn. So your opponent can just pick the thing that's fighting the Varangard to activate. It's not useless. It just means that like you either have to have multiple combats, or you have to have like Strikes Last on your opponent's unit or something to really make use out of this. It's a very small marginal buff, and I kind of like that it's small. One of the things I was worried about with Abraxia was that she would be too Varangard focused, and to bother playing her, you would have to play like 9 Varangard or 12 Varangard or something. But this is so marginal that I don't think you necessarily even worry about it. If you get it, that's neat, but you don't need to play around it or anything, or build into it. And you don't need to feel bad. I think that's the only thing she has that's Varangard specific. You don't need to feel bad if you don't take Varangard. The only thing that would have been nice is if it affected like the Chosen fight twice, or the Deathmonger fight twice, or any of those abilities as well. It is just Varangard. All right. We got once per turn army, any combat phase, Roar of Domination. This is a rampage. Pick an enemy hero in combat with this unit to be the target. Roll a dice on a 3+, subtract 1 from the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons for the rest of the turn. Okay, so I'm seeing a theme here. We got anti-hero +1 rend, and we got -1 attack on enemy heroes. Then we got Blood of Molten Varanite. Roll the dice each time a damage point is inflicted by a combat attack. Sorry, roll a dice each time a damage point inflicted by a combat attack is allocated to this unit. On a 4+, inflict 1 mortal damage on the attacking unit after the fight ability has been resolved. So it's she's got like 7 mortal wounds packaged up in her. This ability is actually really good for dueling because enemy heroes only have 14 wounds on them. Mortal damage is really, really good against the kind of thing that Abraxia is. So she wants to like find the enemy hero monster and get in combat with them, and she'll deal a bunch of damage to them. But even if she doesn't kill them, she'll deal a bunch more when she dies. So this is a very good sort of dueling effect. It's the kind of thing that gets wasted if the enemy has a bunch of zombies or something. You don't end up using this. Then we've got any combat phase, Gorbolga the Accursed. Effect, if this unit is in combat, roll a dice and apply the corresponding effect. 1 uncontrollable power, allocate 1 damage point to this unit. Okay. 2, the Spear Slumbers, no effect. So 1 in 3 chance, sort of nothing happening. 3 to 5, White Hot Varanite, add 1 to the damage characteristic of this unit's Gorbolga for the rest of the turn. And then 6, Rampant Mutation, the effect of White Hot Varanite applies, and you get Crit Mortal as well. Okay. So you go up to damage 3. It's pretty awesome. And you get Crit Mortal, which I missed that you don't get Crit Mortal because I was comparing it to the Karkadrak or the Demon Prince or whatever. The Karkadrak does have Crit Mortal, so it's actually surprisingly low damage. But once you get the extra point of damage on here and you've got the charge, then you go up to like damage 4, and if it's against a hero, it'd be rend 3. So that's actually pretty scary. Sadly, you do lose the good attacks when you get battle damaged. You lose 2 attacks off of Gorbolga, which only has 5 to begin with. And she's got a built-in ward 5 up, which is very, very good for a unit with this sort of number of wounds and armor save. She's not a wizard or anything. I don't know. I kind of expected her to be bigger and scarier. But against the right target, like specifically fighting enemy heroes, she is very scary. I'm just trying to think outside of that. She still gets this most of the time, but you can just whiff this. You can just not get the extra damage. Most of the time you don't have Crit Mortal, but you do have extra rend where like the Chaos Sword on Karkadrak doesn't. I don't know. I think this is a good slot for the army to have. So it's very different to like Be'lakor, and it's definitely a step further than the Demon Prince in terms of a combat hero. But it's just a big beat stick hero that's meant to like go after enemy heroes and fight them. Only moves 10 and doesn't fly. I think for the right points cost, she's pretty good. And she's not a War Master, so you aren't forced to take her as the general. It's kind of neat. 360. I think the extra durability, she doesn't have a ton more damage than some of the other units that you can take as a hero. But with 14 wounds, a threat save, and a 5-up ward, she's very, very durable. I actually kind of like this unit. This is a little bit random, but you get the extra damage on the charge. If you try and fight heroes, you'll do really, really well. I just think her damage is like a little bit low and maybe a little bit swingy. Like if you fail to roll the 3+ here, and you can miss a lot of these. It's not like 2s and 2s and stuff. So she can just roll really low. Yeah, okay. I think she's good. She's not as good as I thought she would be on release. But having the built-in 5-up ward on that 14 wounds 3-up save, that is very powerful. Durable, solid combat profile. Doesn't force you into Vanguard. Um, a little swingy. I've got to remember that she gets the +1 to wound against heroes as well because of being undivided. It's just sad she doesn't have like flying or anything. I know that the thing that she's on doesn't have any wings or anything like that, but it might be a little bit difficult. Actually, I haven't seen how big she is, but I assume she's on a fairly large base, so it might be a bit difficult to get her into where she needs to get to fight the heroes because her performance is so much greater when she's fighting against heroes than when she's not. Like getting the extra rend there, and having this sort of effect, reducing their attacks by 1. Trying to think of if there's any synergy or combination you can use, but not really. I think she's just another like Varangard, right? I guess that's the way to think about her. She's just a fighting unit, and you could pay 310 points to get 3 Varangard, or you could pay 360 points to get this thing, which does less damage than the Varangard, but still a fair bit of damage, especially if she rolls all right down here. And she's very durable. Like 3 Varangard is only 15 wounds on a 3-up save. She's got 1 fewer wound, but a 5-up ward, which is tremendous. Adds like 7 extra wounds. So this is like 21 wounds worth of damage versus a Varangard. Yeah, actually, I think she's a really good distraction Carnifex and a good duelist if you can get her into some enemy heroes. I actually quite like this unit. Yeah, kind of fun. I don't even know if I'm going to bother with... we're on the last 2 guys, are we? Last 3. These are some like junk stuff. I'm not going to go through any of the old warbands, the ones that are all getting squatted. I'm sure some of them are good. They still have their effects and whatnot. In Stormcast's case, it was a lot of their like core units that got squatted. In Slaves to Darkness's case, we got mostly, this is all like ancillary Warcry junk stuff that got squatted for us. And we got replacements in like, we have Chaff, we've got the Dark Oath Marauders and whatnot. So I think the idea is we're supposed to use those instead. Whereas with Stormcast, like a whole block of their actual units, all the Sacrosanct guys actually got moved into, or are getting moved into Legends. So I bothered to do the supplement for them, but these guys, I think it's fine to just ignore the stuff going to Legends. All right, so we've got Gunner Brand. He's got 10 attacks with crit mortals, but they're only 1 damage each, so he's not doing a ton of damage. He's got 6 health and a 5-up save. Any combat phase, he can use it if he's in combat with an enemy hero, and then he can use 2 fight abilities this phase, but he has Strike Last for the next one. So instead of once per game, it's just whenever he's in combat with a hero, he gets to fight twice. He has to pick the hero to be the target of all his attacks. Okay, it's kind of fun. I don't know that he's got enough damage output to kill a hero, but I guess. And then if he kills any heroes, then he gets a ward of 4-up for the rest of the battle. I think he'll lose a lot of these fights, only having a 5-up save with 6 health. He doesn't have that much damage output that he's going to kill heroes in a single go. So I guess I don't care. He's... Oh, I had a section for manifestations. What do you know? Bad. Gonna not take him. Especially since he's a hero, you have to like spend a drop on him, I'm pretty sure. Let's see. Gunnar Brand. You have to take Singri and the Oathsworn Kin, and then he can only take Dark Oath. Yeah, I really don't care. Unless Singri is absolutely amazing. 12 move, 4 health, 5 up save. Okay, dies to a Stiff Breeze. No ward or anything. She's got a couple shooting attacks that probably won't do anything. Some melee attacks. Okay. Swift as the Wind. Only critical hits score successful hits for shooting attacks that targets this unit. Okay, she doesn't die to a Swift Breeze. You actually have to get in combat with her, which is very annoying. I don't think it's going to ever be worth trying to shoot at this unit. Like, you do only need a couple critical hits, but you have to spend so much additional shooting to like land these 4 wounds that I'm not sure it's going to be worth it. And then you've got Uncanny Shot. Add 1 to the rend characteristic of her Warbro for attacks that target enemy units that are within 6 of the other guy. So I guess you want to find some hero and try and shoot at them. Weirdly, doesn't have like an exemption from guarded hero. So even though he's trying to fight probably melee foot heroes because he doesn't have enough attacks or enough health to deal with anything else, this chick is trying to help him by shooting those heroes, but probably can't shoot them. Even though she's got the range, they'll be guarded. So it's kind of a bit of a nombo. That's interesting. It is a fast-moving unit that you can use to do a battle tactic or something like that. I still think she's bad because I'm pretty sure the only way you take her is by taking the other thing as well. Yeah, 0 can only be taken in Gunnar Brand's regiment. So, could do a BT. Gotta take Gunnar though. And then you get the Oathsworn Kin. Alright, 5-inch move, 3 health, 5 up save. I don't know how many are in this unit. A couple of them are armed with heavy Dark Oath weapons, and one of them is armed with a gnarled staff. They do some damage, but nothing tremendous. A bit like the Dark Oath Savages, I think. I know this is 4 attacks, but I have a feeling there's only like 3 or 4 of them in the unit. So altogether, you're probably about the same output as one of those Dark Oath Savager units. Withering Death has got a casting value of 5. They pick a visible enemy hero within 18 of this unit to be the target. They make a casting roll of 2d6. Inflict 1 mortal damage on the target and subtract 1 from the attack characteristic of the target's melee weapons until the start of your next turn. Okay, so 18 inches is good, but it's only a hero. I think if this was any unit, this would actually be good, but it's pretty situational because it only targets heroes. While this unit's Broken Naja is on the battlefield, it has Wizard 1. Okay, so it can cast a spell. So you get some dude who doesn't really do anything, some other dude who will score a battle tactic for you, and a wizard. What are they called? The Oathsworn Kin. Yeah, there's 3 of them. And a wizard. So if I pay like, let's say Gunnar Brand is like a Dark Oath Chieftain, he's 120, and then you pay like, I don't know what you pay for Singri. Let's say 90. Compare it to a unit of Furies, for example, which are pretty annoying to deal with. So what's that, 210? And then you get like these guys as well. And they're a wizard. I suppose you could take these guys and not feel terrible about it. They don't really do anything. But I'm trying to add it all up. I don't think you do. I really don't think you do. Like, it's a whole bunch of nothing. What are they called? Oathsworn Kin. anti-hero spell. Like, you're taking a 280 point squad of things to try and hunt down enemy foot heroes. What is the point? Yep. Okay. That is, I'm pretty sure that's it. I'm going to go through and add up the score. I'm realizing that I put very, very few units in the mediocre category, and that's making me question my marking system. Also, I'm pretty sure I put some of the... Where did I put Abraxia? Put her in non-heroes. Well, she's definitely not a non-hero. Not a War Master. Okay. So, how'd we go? We have 3 good special characters. I like all those special characters. Demon Prince is not a special character. It's just a hero. And I think he's mediocre. So for special characters, we're getting, was it 3 points each? So we get 9 points for special characters. Pretty sure that's the marking scheme. For heroes, we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, minus 2 because we've got 2 Gaunt Summoners. So we're getting 10 for the good stuff. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4 for the mediocre stuff, minus 2 because the Myrmidon is doing something very similar to like a Demon Prince or to an Exalted Hero of Chaos. And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bad heroes with another minus 2, so minus 7 in total. So we get 5 points in total for our heroes. We got fair few good units. I think this is probably the best thing about Slaves to Darkness is they have a lot of good units. But geez, they got some weird trash filling up the book. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 18 minus 2, we've got like 16. Then 1 mediocre unit, we get an extra point there from the Therodons. Therodons are just okay. Then bad units, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bad units with minus 2, so we get minus 7 out of the bad units. Total of 10 on the non-heroes. Not looking too bad. 9, 5, 10, 24 so far. Manifestations are all bad, so it's just like minus 3. Yep. Then the ancillary junk old stuff, which is a surprisingly big category, even though they squatted so many of those the cultist warbands. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things that are good. So 15 points minus 2 for the Chaos Legionnaires. So 13. One, 2, 3 mediocre things, minus 2 for the Raptorix. So we got an extra 1 point out of that. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 bad things, minus another 6. So minus 14. Oh yeah, all the junk cancels out. Neat. All right. So 0, minus 3, 7, 12, plus 9, 21. Mostly dragged down by all of this junk, right? This is horrible. They got bad manifestations and a whole bunch of like extra garbage stuff that doesn't do anything and doesn't really belong, right? Like squat the Manticores, do something with the Ephemeroid Crusher and the... I actually this pharynx does do something, but do something with that Fomeroid Crusher. These guys are tediously annoying to evaluate because you have to take a whole bunch of them at once. In some armies, they might do stuff. In this army, I don't think they do. They're like a whole bunch of units to try and do some, to kill some foot hero, and they don't even have like special bonuses to doing that. They're no better at accessing and killing the foot hero than, I don't know, just like a Demon Prince would be, and the Demon Prince costs the same number of points. Yeah, just don't print any of this stuff. Soul Grinder shouldn't even be in the army. It's terrible garbage. I think lost some points on the monsters as well, the Slaughter Brute and Mutalith. I don't know why they keep insisting that there is a monster list in Slaves to Darkness. But then we got a lot of points. Varangard, Chosen Warriors, Knights, Dark Oath Marauders, Fell Riders, all quite good. You've got some good heroes as well, like the Gaunt Summoner is pretty good. Chaos Lord on Karkadrak I think is fine. This Chaos Sorcerer Lord is good. Chieftain on Horse and Demon Prince are like, okay, they get an extra point there. Definitely some really good special characters. I'm really happy about those. Lots of armies have lots of really useless special characters. But the Slaves to Darkness ones, I think you feel good taking any of these guys. Points depending, I suppose. They could always ruin things with points, but you know, Abraxia is like mini Archeon. She's very, very durable, does a decent amount of damage. Be'lakor is, I really like the double casty mid-combat guy. I play Soulblight as well, and I often play Manfred, who is the same sort of okay in combat, has 2 spells, does some like tricky utility stuff as well. It's just a really fun army to build around, or a fun unit to build your army around, I should say. The Dark Oath stuff, disappointing overall. Lots of really stupid, useless Dark Oath heroes, and you really need to invest a lot because of the way the subfactions work. You need to commit a lot to that Dark Oath list to make it work, and then that means you end up taking lots of these really bad heroes. I really don't understand the point of it. Maybe once it's all on the table and you just have so many models that it's like an absolute horde. But when you're at that stage, I don't know why you wouldn't just play Soulblight Gravelords or Gloomspite Gits or something. Like if you want that full horde army, I don't think there's enough support to do that. But they've also weirdly segmented off that part of the army, so it's hard to just use a couple units of them as chaff, right? So yeah, I think that's it for the Slaves to Darkness Warscrolls. I'm going to leave it there for that one. My brain is absolutely melting. There's more than a couple times where I just could not get some words out there, so I'm sure you're noticing that. I guess the final score for Slaves to Darkness is an overall 41 out of 100. That's a really... Oh, I can't put it in just because of Obsidian. I don't know. We'll just put a total score down here. So 41 out of 100. That's a really rough looking score for an army that I actually have quite a lot of fun playing, but there's just so much junk in these books. And I was really hoping when we got the indexes that a lot of the, like, they're going to slim down the rules. They got an opportunity to cut down a lot of rules. It's only going to be 3 heroic traits, 3 artifacts. They managed to come up with 3 totally useless artifacts. It boggles the mind how much they screw these things up. So that's why the score is so low, because there is so much additional junk. Hidden in this big pile of garbage, there is definitely a very strong and fun army to play. I just don't know why they insist on, 60 points worth of garbage out of 100. It shouldn't be 60% garbage and like 41% good stuff. We should maybe have a slimmer, more useful book all around. And there's just so many dead units and so many abilities, so much repetition of, I've got a Chaos Lord that like fights and then brings in some other unit that fights and it gets like +1 to wound with an ability that's just not functional. It's really sad to see. And I don't know if it's just like a lack of effort from the design team, or whether the way they design the army might be like, here's this core set of things that are good, And then outside of that, we want to give you rules so that you can technically use all of your miniatures. But really, this is the army. It's this little set of things over here. And then all this other stuff is like the extra stuff. But I could understand that if they actually communicated that. If they were like, okay, we're going to use this set of cards or this set of Warscrolls this season. These are the ones that are like top picks. And then the rest of the stuff, look, here's some rules if you want to use them, but they're not part of like the competitive army. And I could, I don't know, introduce that in my marking system. I could say like, well, I'm going to evaluate the ones that are really good as though they're the ones you're supposed to be using. And then, yeah, here are some other ones that technically exist as well. Obviously, they don't want to do that because they don't want to tell you, yeah, I know you bought these models, but they're basically trash. But that ends up being what they do anyway. So I don't know. I don't have good solutions other than like just design good rules. And things like the artifacts, they're not even models. There's no downside to just designing good artifacts. Why do they have 3 trash ones? Even the heroic traits, 6 out of 9. I feel like this is way overvalued. Even this is an enormously generous score for the heroic traits that they have, and the battle formations are pretty bad as well. Anyway, this is the score for a good book. Slaves to Darkness is a good book. I'm very happy about the changes that we got in the army, and overall how we fared in terms of the index. So it'll be interesting to see as we apply this marking scheme to armies that I know maybe a little bit less about, and armies that perhaps didn't make it through the index as well as Slaves to Darkness did. Whew. All right. Yep. Gonna leave it there, and I'll see you in the next one.